Hello, my DIY loving friends. My name is Sarah, and this is Medicated Housewife DIY, where crafting and mental health come together. I know it's been a while, but I wasn't going to let you guys miss out on the 2025 tumbling tower block or Jenga block hacks, almost 3 hours of DIY. I've got 34 Jenga block projects for you to keep you really busy over the holiday season. So buckle up and let's go DIY together. For this DIY, I'll be using 160 tumbling tower blocks from Dollar Tree. I'm placing them into 4 different sets: a set of 2 blocks, a set of 6 blocks, a set of 12 blocks, and a set of 20 blocks, as you see displayed here. I'm using super glue wood glue, also from Dollar Tree, to attach the blocks together into the 4 different block sets. Starting with the set of 2 blocks side to side. Then the set of 6 blocks, which consists of 2 rows of 3 blocks attached side to side. That's followed by the set of 12 blocks, which consists of 3 rows of 4 blocks that are attached side by side. And then the set of 20 blocks, which consists of 4 rows of 5 blocks that are also all attached side by side. Now I have 4 different sets, and I go ahead and make 3 more of each set. So I have 4 sets of 2 blocks, 4 sets of 6 blocks, 4 sets of 12 blocks, and 4 sets of 20 blocks, which equals 160 blocks, as you see here, in total used for this project. I made a mixture of hot water and lots of strong, cheap instant coffee to create a stain for 2 of my 4 sets of blocks. I start by staining all 4 of the 2 block sets using the instant coffee. I like to use coffee as a stain because it dries quickly and makes a nice, warm, but totally sheer wood tone. I use a dry paper towel to absorb the excess liquid and set the 4 sets of 2 coffee-stained blocks aside to dry. The second set I'm going to coffee stain is the 4 sets of 12 blocks, staining them the same way as I stained the 4 sets of 2 blocks. I'm leaving the other 2 sets, that's the sets of 6 and the sets of 20, the natural wood color. I'm doing this so I have a contrast in color between the different sets of blocks, as you will see. I take 2 of the natural color sets of 20 and attach them together in an L shape, as you can see here, and then set that aside to dry. I take the 2 remaining sets of 20 and attach them together also in an L shape and let both L shapes fully dry. Once both pieces are dry, I stand them both up and attach them together at the corners, as you see me doing here, and I give them some time to dry. Now, initially, I turned the large piece upside down with the side I wanted to use as the top now on the bottom. I attach the 12-piece set with the coffee stain to the bottom corner of one of my sides, and then attach the natural color 6-piece set to that. And then finally, the 2-block coffee stain set to that. And here you can see the light and dark contrasting colors. Then I flipped the whole thing over so the top is now on the top, and proceed to attach the stained and unstained pieces, alternating by color and size to each of the remaining 3 sides, the same way as the first side we did. So they are cascading in size order, largest to smallest, and alternating light and dark until all of my pieces are attached. And this is my tumbling tower block cascading candle holder? Or is it a plant stand? Or is it a narrow but tall riser? Let's not label it. I really like the 2-tone wood vibe going on, and personally, I like it for a nice large candle holder. There, I labeled it. A lovely neutral decor use for some Dollar Tree tumbling tower blocks. And for those of you keeping track on what's been going on, I have an Ellie May pup date. She has been resting comfortably since she horrifically broke her 2 front legs and had emergency surgery right after Christmas. Thank you all so much for your caring messages and support. I've had my hands full as she requires a lot more hands-on attention, and I'm doing my best to get back on track with more videos for all of you. And she's doing her best, trying to get around as best that she can, trying to walk. It's been a time. And Ellie and I both thank you all for your support. Now, back to crafting. For this DIY, I'm starting with this oval wood plaque from Dollar Tree, and I'm using a mixture of water and folk art antique wax, which I'll link for you below. I'm painting the entire plaque on both sides because we will be using the back of the plaque as the front for our purposes. I've also got these 4 wooden people that come in an assorted size pack from Amazon, and I will link them below. But you could also use the little wooden angels they sell in a pack from Dollar Tree for this as well. I paint the 4 people with the same water and antique wax mixture as I did the plaque. Next, I'm using 56 total of those lovely brown tumbling tower blocks from Dollar Tree that we all love so much because, well, someone's got to do it, right? I start by placing 8 blocks around the edge of my plaque on their sides, spaced out as you see here, and I glue them in place, and that is our first row. I place the second row of blocks down on top of the first, also 8 blocks, each placed on top of the empty space between the blocks in that first row. That third row is going to be more of the same with 8 more blocks that are all placed above the empty space between the blocks in the second row. The 4th, the 5th, the 6th, and then finally the 7th rows are all placed the exact same way. They're all using 8 blocks, and with that, we've used a total of 56 of those brown tumbling tower blocks. Next, I have this extra thick jute I got on Amazon, and I'll link it for you below, but you could also use regular jute to do this too. I cut a whole bunch of pieces of the jute that are long enough to weave in and out of the rows of blocks from the bottom to the top. I'm using 3 pieces of jute for each weave, so I did cut quite a few pieces. I am starting with the lowest opening in the blocks at the bottom, and I use some hot glue to adhere the 3 pieces of jute to the inside of the hole, then take the 3 pieces and weave them over the block that's directly above the hole and into the next hole, and then out of the hole above that, and then over the block on top of that hole. I use some more glue to wrap the 3 pieces over the top block into the inside of our project, and then I'm going to trim the excess pieces on the inside. And this is a basic weave. We're going over and under the blocks, and I'm going to be doing this on every row of all of my blocks, all the way around that entire oval, doing my best to keep the 3 pieces of jute flat and smooth wherever possible, and then also doing my best to trim the excess hanging jute on the inside of my woodblock oval. It's not perfect, but we will definitely try and fix all of this later. And to cover up some of those messy glue and jute pieces that are sticking up everywhere, I'm using a piece of this burlap roll I got on Amazon. I'll link it for you below, but you could also use the burlap ribbon in rows from Dollar Tree if you'd prefer. I cut a piece to fit inside, and I am hot gluing the top edge of the burlap to the top edge of my project, which lands just under the top inside edge of that 7th row of blocks, as you can see right here. Then to neaten up the burlap seam, I wrap 2 rows of the thick jute over the seam that's between the burlap and the top row of blocks. Did I need it? I don't know, but I did it anyway. Lastly, I turned the piece over and used some E6000 glue for stability to attach the 4 wooden people feet to the bottom of the oval to give my project some height. And this is my woven woodblock basket, and honestly, I'm loving the dark wood with the woven jute. The burlap and the wood legs are just the icing on the cake for this high-end tumbling tower block DIY. Lots of bang for your buck, in my opinion, and I hope you love it too. For this DIY, the first thing we're doing is making one set of 8 of the brown tumbling tower blocks from Dollar Tree. I'm using super glue wood glue also from Dollar Tree to attach them. I make one set of 4 blocks that are 2x2 and then glue another set of 4 directly on top of that to create a set of 8 as you see right here. Next, I create a set of 12 of the brown tumbling tower blocks by attaching 6 blocks together side by side and then gluing 6 more blocks directly on top of them. So with the set of 8 and the set of 12, we have a total of 20 of the brown tumbling tower blocks used. Then I create 3 sets of 12 of the natural color tumbling tower blocks, the same as the set of 12 of the brown tumbling tower blocks that we just made. So that's a set of 6 attached side by side with 6 more blocks glued directly on top of them. And we're going to make 3 of those sets and put them aside to dry. Next, we create 3 more sets of 8 of the natural color tumbling tower blocks, also just like the set of 8 brown blocks we made. So that's 2 sets of 2 blocks side by side with 4 more blocks glued directly on top of them. And we are going to be making 3 of these 8 block sets as well. So altogether, we've used 20 brown blocks and 60 natural color blocks, 4 sets of 12 and 4 sets of 8. I take one set of 8 natural color blocks and one set of 12 natural color blocks, and I use some Faux antique wax mixed with water to stain the 2 sets on all sides a nice warm sheer brown color that contrasts with the existing dark brown tumbling tower blocks. I take a second set of 12 and a second set of 8 of those natural color blocks, and these I'm painting using a mixture of water and white chalk paint to create a whitewash effect on those 2 sets with some wood grain showing through. For the last set of 8 natural blocks and the last set of 12 natural blocks, I make a brownish red stain using some water mixed with apple barrel, barn red, and brown oxide, both of which I will link for you below, giving the 2 final sets of blocks a nice sheer brownish red tone with the wood grain still showing through. To assemble the piece, I attach the 12 block red tone set to the light brown 12 block set, just like you see here in an L shape, and I attach the dark brown 12 block set to the whitewashed 12 block set, also in that same L shape as you see me doing right here. I attach those 2 L-shaped pieces together at the corners as you are watching me do here. And you can also pause or slow down or even replay the video if you need to see some parts of it again. I glue the wide side of the dark brown 8 block set to the red toned 12 block set. I attach the whitewashed 8 block set to the light brown 12 block set. I take the red toned 8 block set and glue it to the dark brown 12 block set. And lastly, I attach the light brown 8 block set to the whitewashed 12 block set. And this is my color block, tumbling tower block, riser, or candle holder, or again, small plant stand. You can decide that for yourself. I like the washed out multicolors of the wood. It's a small piece of decor with a bigger personality, in my opinion anyway, and super easy to make. For this DIY, the brown blocks are back, my friend, and as your official self-appointed ambassador of Dollar Tree brown tumbling tower blocks, we're going to use 231 of these lovely rectangles of brown wood. I do this for you. You're welcome. To begin with, I'm going to be making rows of 4 blocks that are glued together end to end, as you see here. I'm using the super glue wood glue from Dollar Tree to attach them, and we'll be making a total of 42 of these 4-block rows. Yes, it's a lot of 4-block rows. I know. We're making 42 of them. After making the 42 sets of 4 blocks, I'm then making 21 sets of 2 blocks, also attached end to end like the 4-block sets. And then I am also using 21 single brown tumbling tower blocks as well, in addition to the sets of 4 and the sets of 2. And that makes a total of 231 blocks used. I'm using Folk Art white chalk paint, which I will link for you below, and I'm going to be painting both of the flat wide sides of all my sets, the 42 sets of 4, as well as the 21 sets of 2 and the flat sides of the 21 single blocks. No paint on the edges or the ends, just on those flat wide sides. I do my best to stay in the lines with the paint and not to overlap any paint onto those edges and those ends. With all my sets of blocks and single blocks painted on the wide flat sides off camera, I used a sanding sponge to roughly distress all those visible brown edges and ends to really change up their dull, flat brown appearance and give them all more visually interesting looks. I'm going to assemble all of these into tall squares. Each square using 2 sets of 4, combined with 1 set of 2 and 1 single block, as you see here. I place the 2 sets of 4 opposite one another with a set of 2 on one side and the single block across from that. Hopefully that makes sense to you. You can always pause, replay, or slow down the video at any point if you need to. I'm going to be using up all the sets that I made to make everything into these tall squares. Just watch the video to see how I make these, and you'll understand just by seeing me do it several times. So, full transparency here, I had no idea how I was going to assemble this. I really just had to wing it as I went along. I knew I had to start on sort of a diagonal, so I attached 3 of the tall squares together, going diagonally. And I also knew I wanted to have the 4-block side followed by the 2-block side and then the single block side, sort of creating a pattern. You do not have to follow my pattern. There is no right or wrong here. I was really just trying things out and moving them around, and truly was just hoping I'd end up with a sort of diamond or square-ish shape in the end. So I just kept attaching the squares one by one, trying to be mindful of the overall shape of the top that I would end up with. It's not a foolproof plan, I admit, but I really felt that the color combo of the blocks, and especially the 2-tone squares from the top view, looked really cool. And I just did my best to make everything work. And you'll notice that I did leave off the last tall square I made because I really just didn't see a place for it. And I end up with this diamond shape that's comprised of 4 rows of 5 of these tall square shapes, all staggered diagonally. It was like a stream of consciousness DIY. I just let it ride, and I really just hoped that I ended up liking the results. And this is my 2-tone tall wood riser made of painted and distressed brown tumbling tower blocks. You might love it, you might hate it. I kind of love it. I definitely love the way it looks from the top view. Those squares of distressed brown wood combined with a chalk white finish, I think looks so upscale. Could the overall form of how the pieces are assembled be improved upon? Probably they could. I'm looking at it as a DIY in progress. Love the concept, but maybe the execution could use a little more thought. Still, overall, another totally unique take on those lovely brown tumbling tower blocks that hasn't been done before. You be the judge. For this DIY, I'll be using a total of 48 of the natural tumbling tower blocks from Dollar Tree, and I'm using the super glue wood glue, also from Dollar Tree, to glue them together. So to begin with, we are making sets of 3 blocks that are all glued side to side, as you can see me doing right here. Once I have 8 of these sets of 3, I am going to join 2 sets of 3 together to make a set of 6. These 2 sets are glued end to end, as you see here, and I'm doing that until I have 4 sets of 6 in front of me. I stand up my 4 sets of 6 blocks, and I'm going to be attaching them together into a square shape using all 4 of the sets of 6 blocks. Then I create another set of 8 of the 3 block sets, but instead of completing a second square with it, I do it in sections. I make one corner piece using 2 sets of 3, and I place that corner set of 6 inside my other square to see how it fits. I make another corner piece, and then I add a second 3-piece set to one side of that corner. I attach 2 more of the 3 block sets together and attach them to the long side of the corner that we just made. I attach the final 3 block set to the end of that to create another corner, and I place all my pieces aside to dry. Meanwhile, I have these 2 square wood planks from a pack of 6 at Dollar Tree, and I want to attach 2 of them together. So to begin with, I use some wood glue on the inside edge, and then I push the 2 squares together. But because I know the glue alone is not strong enough to keep these 2 squares together, I add 3 wood craft sticks from Dollar Tree glued across the bottom to give the 2 pieces some extra strength and to help keep them together. And then I place something heavy on top of that to dry. Moving back to my tower block squares, I glue the large 3/4 square piece to the upper outside of that finished square corner, as you see me doing right here. And then I'm going to glue the small corner piece to that same corner, but on the inside of my finished square, in the hopes that they look intersected. And you know, I'm always straight with you guys. They didn't line up perfectly. They really didn't. But honestly, they looked fine. So I'm just going to go with it and let my 2 intersecting squares fully dry. I grab this rectangle wood plank from Dollar Tree along with the 2 wood square planks that we had glued together. And I'm using a mixture of equal parts hot water and strong instant coffee as a stain to stain all my wood planks on both sides and on all the edges, doing 2 coats on each piece for a deeper, warm wood tone. And then I place them all aside to dry. Next, I use that same coffee stain on my 2 intersecting tumbling tower block squares, making sure to fully cover the whole inside of those squares. So I do the inside first, and then I get all of those edges and all the sides. I want them to be covered fully and evenly. So I did 2 coats of the coffee on this piece too, so that that brown wood tone would be exactly the same for all of my pieces. I flipped the 2 Jenga block intersected squares on their side and centered them onto the small rectangle as best that I could before adding some wood glue to the bottom of the blocks and gluing it in place. And then I centered the top 2 square planks on top of my intersected squares and added some glue to the top of the intersected squares and positioned the top planks down on top of that. And because clearly I don't know when to stop, I had a bunch of these coffee stir sticks that had been coffee stained already from another project in my stash. But the Dollar Tree craft sticks will work for this as well. I cut them all to size and I used some wood glue to cover all the edges of those wood planks, which I didn't think looked that great uncovered and raw. They just weren't great. So I basically covered all the edges on the top planks as well as on the bottom one, just giving the project a more finished look. And I also placed a wood stir stick over that seam on the top of the 2 square planks in the middle that we had glued together, just to complete the look. And this is my tumbling tower block intersecting square riser. And I love this riser so much. It looks like such a high-end, modern, sophisticated mini console table. I'm really happy with the finishing touches of the wood sticks framing the raw edge of the wood planks. You would never guess this project cost about $3 to make. Just stunning. A definite Dollar Tree tumbling tower block winning DIY. This one's a keeper. For this DIY, they're back. We're using 32 of the brown tumbling tower blocks from Dollar Tree. I'm telling you now, I don't think I will ever run out of these brown blocks, especially if that's what Dollar Tree keeps shipping out whenever I order blocks. But that's okay though. Clearly, we are making it work. You and I, we are in this together. So 32 total of the brown blocks, and we are using them to make 8 sets of 4 blocks each, all of which are attached end to end. I'm using the super glue wood glue, also from Dollar Tree, to attach them. We're also using 32 of the small wood cubes that come in a pack of 36 from Dollar Tree. So we're using a little less than 1 pack. I'm using a mixture of water and Faux art antique wax, which I'll link for you below. And I paint all 32 of the wood cubes using the wax and water. And I use a dry paper towel to rub off the excess liquid. This leaves me with a nice sheer brown tone with the wood grain of the cubes still coming through. While my cubes dry, I'm using a sanding sponge to sand and distress all my 4 block sets of the brown blocks because I really like the look of the distressed brown blocks as opposed to the solid brown blocks. It really makes a difference, in my opinion. To assemble, I am using 5 of the cubes on the first row. I space them out with that first cube placed on the bottom edge, and then the second cube on the seam between the first 2 blocks, the third cube on the seam between the next 2 blocks, the 4th cube on the seam above that, and that 5th cube on the top edge, as you see me doing here, and then I attach the next set of 4 blocks to that. All my block sets are standing on their sides. My second row of cubes uses 4 of the cubes, and each one is going to be placed in between the cubes from that first row so that they all look alternating. We'll have 5 cubes and then we have 4 cubes and so on, followed by another set. Each of the subsequent rows follows the same pattern. It's 1 row of 5 cubes, followed by a row of 4 cubes, and so on until we've used up all of our cubes and the 8 sets of 4 blocks, and we've formed this square shape. And this is my brown tumbling tower block and wood cube trivet, or extra large coaster, or wall sculpture for that matter. You could also make it really big and use it like a tray. The sky's the limit. I can't tell you what to do with it. You use it however you like. But I really like the 2 wood tones and the distressing, and it's still a strong and functional use of everyone's favorite, the brown tumbling tower blocks. For this DIY, we'll be using a total of 43 of the brown tumbling tower blocks, of course, from Dollar Tree. And so to begin with, we are making sets of 3 blocks glued end to end. I am using the super glue wood glue, also from Dollar Tree, to attach them. We'll be making a total of 6 of these 3 block sets, all attached end to end, and we're using a total of 18 blocks for this so far. Then I'm making sets of 2 blocks, also attached end to end. We'll need 12 of these 2 block sets, which are using 24 blocks. And combined with the 6 sets of 3 we've already made, we've used 42 brown tumbling tower blocks in total. I grabbed this bamboo cutting board from Dollar Tree, and using a small screwdriver, I'm going to distress the board, just really grinding and pulling that screwdriver across it. I want to really beat it up and make it look old and distressed, just filled with character. Like it's lived a life and it's seen a few things, like me, and maybe you. You know what I mean. And once the board is adequately beat up, I take some Folk Art antique wax, which I will link for you below, and paint the whole cutting board using the wax. And since we've distressed it, the wax gets caught in all those little scratches and marks that we made, and those look darker in contrast to the rest of the cutting board. And the whole two-tone look gives the board some really nice dimension. I use a dry paper towel to rub off the excess wax, and that also helps deposit more of the wax into those scratches and grooves as well. I paint both sides and the edges so that whole board is painted with the wax. I'm using this Folk Art black chalk paint, which I will link for you below, and a dry chip brush. And I distress paint over all the sets of brown tumbling tower blocks, applying the paint to all sides and all the edges of the block sets, starting with the 6 3-block sets and working my way through the 12 2-block sets as well, until all the sets of blocks have a rough distress coat of black chalk paint that are covering all sides, giving them a nice beat up black and brown look. To begin assembling the project, I place 1 set of 3 blocks along the bottom and place 1 set of 2 blocks on both ends of the 3-block sets, creating a large U shape as you see here. I do my best to keep all the angles as straight as I can, but you know those Dollar Tree blocks, they are far from perfectly straight. So I just do my best. And we'll be doing that with all 6 of the 3-block sets. Essentially, we're creating 6 large U shapes with them and then setting them aside to fully dry. Once dry, I stand all the U shapes up and place a single block between each one, and that's just as a spacer. They are not part of the design, they won't stay there. I'm using dabs of E6000 glue on each of the tops of the 2-block sets, and then I carefully place my cutting board on top of the dabs of glue, centering it in the middle as best I can by eyeballing it. It was not perfectly centered, but that's okay. It's crafting, not science. And this is my Rustic tumbling tower block and cutting board riser. I love the Rustic distressing on both the beat up bamboo cutting board top as well as the black distress painted brown block bottom. Both paint techniques give this DIY a more upscale look and feel, in my opinion. The spacing between the 6 legs on the bottom really make it visually interesting, and they are functional by creating a shelf under the riser as well. A stunning use of those infamous brown tumbling tower blocks. For this DIY, starting with 8 of the natural color wood tumbling tower blocks from Dollar Tree, I create a square shape with 2 blocks on each of the 4 sides. I'm using super glue wood glue, also from Dollar Tree. I create the first corner of the square and then build out the rest of the square from that point. And once I finish, I repeat the same process and create a second identical square using another 8 blocks for a total of 16 blocks that are used so far. Next, I want to build up the 4 corners of the bottom square. So I place 2 blocks on the first corner, followed by 2 more blocks directly on top of those. And I'm going to repeat that same procedure 3 more times to build up all 4 corners of that square evenly. I place some glue at the tops of those 4 corners so I can then attach the top square on top of them to create this cube shape. And in a perfect world, these would fit together perfectly. However, in the world of imperfect Dollar Tree wood blocks, we're not that lucky. So I do my best to adjust all those corners to fit together as best I can. I have this wood square from Dollar Tree, and I've already used a pencil and ruler to draw lines going diagonally in both directions. I've spaced the lines apart by 1 centimeter, creating all these diagonal diamond shapes. And now, using a small screwdriver and metal ruler, I'm going to scrape over all those lines I created to make a raised texture of those little diamonds all over the entire surface of the wood square, as you see me doing here, creating this awesome textured pattern on the entire surface. And if you can't tell, I was pretty happy with how they worked out. I'm using some black acrylic paint to paint the top textured surface of the square, making sure to get into all those little nooks and crannies on that surface for full coverage. I also painted all the edges of the square because some of the edges on those Dollar Tree squares are pretty rough and unattractive. Then I put the square aside to dry. For the tumbling tower block cube, I am using some Folk Art antique wax, as well as a dry paper towel to rub off the excess wax. I'm going to paint the entire outside and the entire inside of the cube, making sure that the cube is completely painted with the wax from every angle before setting it aside for it to dry. And then, because I decided I really hated those rough wood edges on the Dollar Tree wood square, off camera, I had grabbed some wood craft sticks from Dollar Tree and cut them to size to fit over the 4 side edges of the square. I also painted them with the same antique wax as I painted the tower block cube. I wanted my textured patterned surface to have a glossy finish, so I'm using this clear gloss polyacrylic sealer from Minwax, which I will link for you below to get a glossy shine. I paint the whole surface as well as the edges with the sealer, and then I let that dry completely overnight. And because even with the glossy sealer on those rough edges, I still didn't like the look of them, I used some wood glue to attach the cut and stained craft sticks I had made earlier and covered up all 4 edges on the sealed textured wood square. Lastly, I covered the top of the cube with some more wood glue, and then I carefully center my textured square over the cube, and then I'm going to set the whole thing aside to dry. And this is my two-toned textured pattern riser or stand, and I'm so happy with how this textured top turned out. I love the texture. It kind of reminds me of a snakeskin look or something like that. Personally, I feel like I've never seen something quite like it before, and in my opinion, it's a unique and original look and definitely impressive for a Dollar Tree wood project, but you be the judge. For this DIY, we're using a grand total of 53 of the natural color tumbling tower blocks from Dollar Tree for the entire project, and the super glue wood glue also from Dollar Tree. I'm making sets of 3 blocks, all glued side by side, as you see here, and I'm going to need 13 of these 3-block sets, so 39 of the 53 total blocks are these 13 sets of 3 blocks. To begin assembling, I place 4 of these 3-block sets spaced evenly apart and glue a 5th 3-block set in the middle of the 4 as you see here. The 4 on the bottom are facing the horizontal direction, which is across, and all the rest will be vertical direction going up and down. Using some loose blocks as spacers to hold up this second level of blocks, I then place 1 set beneath the middle set and 1 above it the same way as that middle set of 3 blocks. Using some more loose blocks as spacers, I add 3 more sets of blocks, one on one end, following the same lines as the 3 sets in the middle that we had just added. Then I repeat the same layout on the other side with the 3 remaining sets of blocks and allow it all some time to dry. While that piece dries, I take 14 more blocks and make a base, starting with 4 blocks attached end to end. Then 3 blocks attached end to end. And 3 more blocks attached end to end. And then another 4 blocks attached end to end, and that's a total of 53 blocks altogether. Then I create a rectangle shape with the 2 4-block sets across from one another and the 2 3-block sets across from one another, and then set it aside to dry. I mixed equal parts hot water and strong instant coffee to create a stain to paint all my pieces, and first I'm painting the underside of the block squares with this coffee mixture, giving it a nice warm brown tone, but it's still leaving all the wood grain to show through. Then I flip it over and paint the coffee stain onto the front side of the squares the exact same way. I paint the coffee onto all those sides and edges, making sure to cover the sides from all angles to get all those little nooks and crannies evenly. I paint the rectangular base with the same instant coffee the exact same way, on the outside, on the inside, and on all the edges. Lastly, I place my set of squares on top of the rectangular base and secure it in place with some wood glue, placing something heavy on top of it to stabilize it. And this is my tumbling tower block square trivet or large coaster. And yes, I know it has some definite similarities to a wood pallet, but I think the square shapes and multi-levels give it just a little more pizzazz over a plain old wood palette, just my opinion. I love the natural wood color from the coffee stain, and I even think it has some possible wall art possibilities to it. Simple, but with a little bit of rustic elegance. For this DIY, we're back with even more of the brown tumbling tower blocks from Dollar Tree. I'm using superglue wood glue to assemble these blocks into sets of 3 that are attached side by side. For this project, we will be making 25 of these sets of 3. So that's 75 of the blocks used for this, and later we will use an additional 6 blocks to complete the project. So our grand total of brown tumbling tower blocks used is 81 in total. But right now we are concentrating on the 25 sets of 3 blocks. Once the 25 sets of 3 blocks have dried, I used a sanding sponge to sand down all of them on all sides and edges and really distress that solid brown finish and make them more rustic and visually appealing. I like these blocks so much better this way. I'm assembling the sets of blocks in rows. There is 1 row of 5 sets of blocks in the middle, as you see here, and all 5 are in the vertical or portrait direction with the blocks all going up and down. They will be attached at the corners to the next row of 4 sets of blocks on both sides, and both rows of 4 have the blocks facing the horizontal or landscape direction, as you see here. At any point, you can pause the video or replay it if you need to see the layout or if you are following along. So it's a center row of 5 sets of blocks flanked by a row of 4 sets of blocks on both sides, all attached at the corners. Next, I attach 2 more rows of 3 sets of blocks each row on both sides of the 4 set rows, turning their orientation back to vertical. So basically each row alternates in the direction that the blocks are going. Hopefully that makes sense to you. Next, we add our 2 set rows on both sides of the 3 set rows, flipping the orientation of the blocks again. They are going in the horizontal direction, alternating each of our rows as we've done with all the others. The final row is a single set on both sides of the 2 set rows, and I switch orientation again. And on that very last row on that right side, I forgot to switch orientation, so it's horizontal when it should be vertical, so we will have to fix that one later. I flipped the whole thing over, and on the back side, I want to reinforce all the corner connections to make the whole piece stronger. So I had these wood coffee stirrers that are really just like thin craft sticks. I'll link them for you below, but the craft sticks from Dollar Tree, you can split those in half and make them more narrow. That would work as well. I glue the sticks to the bottom of the piece so that all the corner connections are reinforced, but without being able to see the sticks when we turn it over. And then I allow them all to dry. I had decided to give the piece some height, so off camera, I had sanded 6 single blocks, bringing our total blocks used up to 81, as I said before. And then I glue a block on the ends of each of the 4 corners of my piece. And for that end set of 3 blocks on the right, that was going in the wrong direction. I had to break it off and reattach it, going in the correct direction. And because this is such a large piece, I decided to reinforce the middle with 2 single blocks in the center to help hold the whole thing up. And this is my gorgeous tumbling tower block. It's too big for a trivet, so let's call it a raised tray. I love the way this tray turned out. I love the design. I love the finish on the wood blocks. I'm just happy with everything. So easy to make and a gorgeous use of those brown tumbling tower blocks. 81 of them, to be exact. For this DIY, I've got this empty baby food jar, courtesy of Ellie May, my puppy that loves her beef baby food. And we are using 20 of these natural color tumbling tower blocks from Dollar Tree. I'm using this Beacon Clear Craft Glue, which I will link for you below, but you can use the Super Glue Wood Glue from Dollar Tree to do this as well. I'm going to glue the 20 tumbling tower blocks standing up around the entire jar. I start by dividing it into quarters with the first 4 tumbling tower blocks. Then placing additional blocks in between the original 4 blocks. And I continue filling in all the empty spaces with the rest of the 20 blocks until there's a continuous ring of standing tumbling tower blocks encircling the entire jar. While the blocks and jar dry, I mixed equal parts hot water and strong instant coffee to use as a stain for all my wood pieces. I've got these 4 large wood half rounds, which I will link for you below, and also this rectangular wood plaque from Dollar Tree. I start by staining the 4 wood half rounds with the instant coffee using a dry paper towel to wipe away the extra liquid. I love the sheer warm brown color that the instant coffee gives on wood surfaces. I decided to grab 2 of these wood rings I had in my stash, and I'll link them below, but you can get wood rings at Dollar Tree too. I stained both rings with the coffee as well, although I wasn't sure if I was going to use both of them, but I wanted them available anyway, just in case. I stained the wood plaque with the coffee stain as well. I wasn't sure which side of the plaque I wanted to use as the bottom or the top, so I just stained it all. And I just have to say, I really wish Dollar Tree would finish the edges of these wood pieces more than they do, instead of just leaving them so rough like this. I just had to say that. Public service message for today. Ultimately, I decided to use the top of the plaque as my bottom, so I glued the 4 half rounds onto the corners as feet for my plaque. Once the jar and blocks was somewhat dry, I stained those with the coffee stain too, starting with the top edges of the blocks and then the inner edge on those tops down to where they meet the glass jar. Moving on to stain the outside edge of the blocks and in between each of those blocks into all those little nooks and crannies as well. Then finally staining the bottom edges of the blocks and inside the edges where they meet the glass jar. I have this roll of self-adhesive faux leather, which is essentially leather-looking duct tape. I will link it for you below, but if you are lucky enough to find the faux leather ribbon at Dollar Tree, you could use that too. I'm not that lucky. I cut a piece of the faux leather and stick it to a piece of parchment paper, then cut that into strips and fold the strips in half evenly, like you see right here. I remove the parchment paper slowly and stick the 2 folded sides of the tape together, so I end up with a 2-sided little leather-looking strap. I made 2 of these for our purposes. I use scissors to trim the edges of the 2 leather straps to remove any excess white adhesive sides that happen to be visible. I'm going to use these straps as handles on my upside down wood plaque by using some hot glue to attach the ends of the straps on both sides of the plaque to hold them in place, as you see right here. I grabbed a couple of these Dollar Tree gold push pins and I use a wire cutter to carefully snip the sharp tack part off of them. And be careful because those little sharp pieces do fly when you snip them. I used the gold pieces left over and a dab of hot glue to cover the 4 edges of my leather straps to look like decorative gold stud embellishments. I decided to embellish the glass jar and wood blocks with the same leather and gold stud look. I cut a small piece of my faux leather strap and glued it to the middle of 4 of the wood blocks, tucking the ends of the leather strap around the 1st and the 4th block so that the edges of the strap were not visible. I add 2 more of the faux gold studs to either side of the leather strap just to complete the look. Lastly, I turn the jar over and on the bottom side, I glue one of my wood rings to the bottom under the wood blocks. I ultimately decided not to use the second wood ring. And this is my wood and faux leather raised tray and mini vase or candle holder. And honestly, I love the look of this DIY. The coffee stained wood, the faux leather, the gold studs, everything comes together beautifully and creates this truly high-end looking classic but modern piece of decor that would work so well with so many different decor styles. Super easy and so worth the small amount of effort involved. The perfect Dollar Tree DIY. For this DIY, I'm using a bunch of these wood craft sticks I got at Dollar Tree, and I've trimmed them down to the length of 2 tumbling tower blocks. I'm using some super glue wood glue, also from Dollar Tree, and I'm gluing 2 of the craft sticks together to make them thicker, using some of these little metal clips to hold them together as they dry. I need 11 of these 2 craft stick sets for this DIY, so I'm using 22 cut craft sticks to make the 11 sets of 2. I'll be using a total of 62 of these natural color tumbling tower blocks from Dollar Tree, and I'm mostly going to be using them in sets of 2 blocks that are glued end to end. Ultimately, we are using 38 of the 62 total blocks used to make into sets of 2 blocks. We're going to be using 19 of those sets of 2 blocks. I take what would be 2 sets of 2 blocks and I'm going to attach them together, one on top of another, to create one set of 4 blocks, as you see right here. Then I make another set of 4, which would also be made from 2 sets of 2 blocks, but this time they are sandwiched one on top of the other, as you see here. We will be making 2 of these sets of 4, which will be the 2 legs of the DIY. Aside from all of those sets of 2, I am also going to be making this set of 12 blocks in 2 rows of 6 blocks that are attached side by side. And then the 2 sets of 6 will be attached together also side by side. I add a set of 2 blocks attached end to end on both sides of the 12 block set to complete it as a base for the project. And off camera, we'll be making a second set just like this one to use as the top of the project. Both base and top are identical. I mixed equal parts of hot water and instant coffee to make a stain to stain all my pieces with a warm brown sheer wood tone. I start by painting both the large base and then the matching top piece on all sides and on all the edges, followed by the one set of 4 blocks, as you see here, also on all the sides and the edges. I stain the 2 legs that were made with the 2 sets of 4 blocks, followed by all my many sets of 2 blocks. Everything stained on all sides and all the edges and the ends. I use a dry paper towel to soak up all the excess liquid. I also stain the 11 sets of 2 craft stick pieces with the instant coffee as well. Same as everything else on both sides and then on all the edges and on all the ends. To begin assembling, I turn my base piece upside down and on the bottom, I glue one craft stick set on both ends on top of the 2 block sets on the ends of that. Then glue 2 additional 2 block sets on top of the craft stick pieces on both sides. I hope that makes sense to you. Then I flip the whole thing over and those block sets and craft stick pieces will be on the bottom of the base. With my base right side up, I'm going to begin building up one side of my project. I'm alternating gluing down a craft stick set and then a 2 block set on top of that. In total, I'll be using 7 of my 2 block sets on this side, all alternating with craft stick sets to create a space in between each of my block sets. I stop building up that side after I've added 3 of the 2 block sets, and I glue down the 2 legs that I made with the sets of 4 blocks. I glue them standing up on the opposite sides of the project base. I continue building up the 2 block side using 4 more sets of 2 blocks, and I'm still alternating with a craft stick set between each until I've added 7 of these 2 block sets in total, and each of them has a space in between the rows from my craft stick pieces. I glue the 4 block front piece that we made earlier in between the front leg and the 2 block built up side and give it a couple of minutes for the glue to set up. Lastly, I glue 2 final sets of craft sticks on top of both sides of the piece, and then I glue the top piece we made that matches the base piece, attaching it to the 2 craft stick sets, so the top now has the same amount of space between it as the wall of 2 block sets that we built. Hopefully that all makes sense to you. Everything is coordinated. And this is my gorgeous modern tumbling tower block riser or pedestal. I really love the look of this decor piece. It looks so finished and upscale. Love the spaces in between the rows of blocks. Love the difference in texture between the two sides. A truly awesome tumbling tower block DIY. For this DIY, I've got this shallow square wood box from Dollar Tree. And we'll be using 12 of the natural color tumbling tower blocks from Dollar Tree, and I'll be cutting both ends of all 12 blocks on a 65-degree angle using this miter shears from Amazon, which I'll link for you below. I painted the box with this Rust-Oleum white gloss spray paint, which I'll link for you below. And because I have to be totally transparent with all of you, I had to cut and assemble these 12 blocks more than once because of my lack of geometry skills, or I'm just not that bright. But I had to recut some of the blocks because I didn't cut the 65-degree angle in the right direction in some cases. I could flip the blocks over in places, but I did have to recut several blocks, and then I had to break apart and re-glue some of the blocks. I'm making 2 sets of 6 blocks to use as 2 legs for the project, and the angles should fit together. I'm going to show you on the video which were correct and which were not. So feel free to pause the video to follow along with the correct cuts and placements, or maybe you're just smarter than me. You can figure it out the first time around. No, I'm not proud of myself, just in case you were wondering. And here are both legs after being corrected. I used some Minwax wood filler, which I will link for you below, to fill in all the cracks between the blocks in an effort to give them all a more solid wood look, and then allowed them to dry for several hours. Once dry, I used a sanding sponge to sand down the wood filler until all the filler areas were smooth. I'm using some Faux antique wax to paint both of the tumbling tower block legs, and I add a little extra wax on the areas with the filler to try and even out the color differences between the filled and the unfilled areas on the blocks, wiping away the excess wax with a dry paper towel. I had already measured the center of the 2 sides of the gloss white box, and I use E6000 glue to attach my tumbling tower block legs to the outside of the 2 sides of the box, centering them to be halfway between the top and the bottom edge of that side of the box, and allowed it to dry overnight. And this is my ultra modern Woodbox riser, and I think this super easy DIY really packs a punch. Not including my poor geometry skills, it takes next to nothing in supplies and effort, but it really delivers in modern style and sleek sophistication, the perfect kind of DIY. For this DIY, we're using a grand total of 18 of the dreaded brown tumbling tower blocks from Dollar Tree for this project. First, we take 12 of them, and using some super glue wood glue, also from Dollar Tree, we're assembling them into 4 groups of 3 blocks, all in a U shape, as you can see right here. I grab 3 more of the blocks, and we're going to be attaching those together end to end, as I'm doing right here. We're left with 2 single blocks and 1 block that I've cut in half using my miter shears, which I'll link for you below. And I'm using a sanding sponge to sand the 2 single blocks and the half blocks. Next, I use the sanding sponge to sand the 3 block set, sanding all sides and the edges and the ends, because I've really been liking the look of these brown blocks when they're sanded down and distressed. It is so much better than just the solid brown color. I also sand down all 4 of those U shapes the same way until all of my 18 blocks have been sanded down and distressed. To assemble, I glue one of the single blocks to the middle of the U shape when it's upside down, as you can see me doing right here. I used a ruler and a pencil to measure and find the middle of the second U shape, which I attach right side up to the top of that single block. I duplicate that piece with the last two U shapes and that last single block, and I'm creating two identical sides. Then I grab the two half block pieces and attach each one to the middle of the top U shape, as you see here. And yes, they very much look like stick figures. It is not just you. Once those two identical sides are dry, I attach the 3-block set to the middle of the bottom U shape, and I'm going to give that a few minutes for that glue to set up. Meanwhile, I've got this wood rectangle from a pack of rectangles from Dollar Tree, and I've mixed up equal parts hot water and instant coffee to coffee stain the wood rectangle to give it a very light brown stain, just a tiny bit darker than the natural wood tone. I am also mindful of staining the edges of the rectangle too, although I didn't love the way those edges looked even after they were stained. Turning my attention back to the blocks, I attach the final side to the 3-block set and then put it aside to fully dry. So as I said, I didn't like the edges of the wood rectangle, so I'm going to cover them and frame them in using these wood coffee stir sticks that I had already coffee stained from a previous project. But you could also use the craft sticks from Dollar Tree to do this as well. I trimmed them to fit around the rectangle like a frame. I had turned my rectangle upside down with the bottom side facing up. I also placed a heavy glass vase on top of it because, true to form, those Dollar Tree wood rectangles are not perfectly flat. I know, shocker. So I tried to add a little weight to help push it down straight. I use wood glue to attach the pieces of coffee stir sticks to the edges of the rectangle to frame it in. With the two tower block sides dry, also not a surprise that the tumbling tower blocks were not uniformly sized, so to make them all even height, I added some scrap pieces of craft stick to two of the tops of the blocks, so that when I added the rectangle on top, it would be straight and even. I used some wood glue to attach the rectangle to the block tops. And this is yet another brown tumbling tower block riser or pedestal. I think this DIY is truly unique looking. It's a little taller than most, but it's so different and original looking. I'm really pleased with how it came out. Hopefully you are too. Super easy and only using 18 tumbling tower blocks. For this DIY, we're using a total of 64 of the natural color tumbling tower blocks from Dollar Tree, as well as the super glue wood glue also from Dollar Tree. And at first I was making sets of 3 blocks that were all glued end to end. As you see me doing right here, I'm making 16 sets. So as I said, I started making 16 sets of the 3 blocks glued end to end. And then I realized I needed all of these sets to be a little bit longer. So I needed them all to be 4 blocks long, and I took all 16 sets of 3 and I added 1 block to the end of all of them to make them 16 sets of 4 blocks that are attached end to end for a total of 64 blocks used in total, as you see right here. Then I'm going to take the 16 sets of 4 and I need to attach them together in 2s side by side to create 8 sets of 8 blocks. And those are made out of the 2 sets of 4 that you see right here. I have 4 of these wood squares that come in a pack from Dollar Tree, and using this Rattan wood stain in the color Ipswich Pine, which I will link for you below, I'm staining all 4 of the squares plus all 8 of my sets of 8 blocks with the Ipswich Pine stain. I'm going to stain all the sides, all the edges, and the ends of the block sets, and both sides and all 4 edges of the 4 wood squares. I'm using a dry paper towel to soak up the excess stain, and then I did a second coat of the stain on the 4 wood squares and the 8 sets of 8 blocks, and I allowed them all to dry for several hours. Once the stain had dried, I take the 2 sets of 8 blocks and I want to create corner pieces with them. So I glue 1 set of 8 to another set, as you see here, and I'm creating a corner. So I'll end up with 4 sets of 16 blocks made into 4 corner pieces, and then I allow them some time to dry. To begin assembling the project, I place 3 loose tumbling tower blocks down as spacers, and I place one of my wood squares on top of them. I dry fit 2 of the corner pieces diagonal from each other on 2 of the corners of that wood square, and I use a pencil to mark where the corners touch the square and apply some glue to attach the squares to the corner pieces. I repeat the same thing on a second set of corners and the wood square and allow those 2 pieces to fully dry. Once that side was dry, I turn the piece upside down and I place 2 levels of the loose blocks down as spacers so that this particular wood square will have twice as much space between the top of the corners and where the square is placed. Again, we're going to mark the square and where the square and corners touch each other, and we're going to apply some glue to attach the square to the corners at that point. I'm going to repeat that same thing with the second piece, placing the 4th final wood square also on top of 2 levels of loose blocks to match the first piece that we just made. Then I'm going to allow those 2 pieces to fully dry. I turn the piece over again so that the top is on the bottom, and I want to reinforce those top shelf squares. So I grab 4 wood cubes from Dollar Tree and I glue one of them under that bottom square at the corner, which is actually going to be the top of the project. Hopefully that makes sense to you. So there is a wood cube under the 2 corners of the square where it attaches to the corner piece, helping to hold the square up when we turn that project right side up and making it stronger. When I looked at the finished project, I really didn't like the visible edges of the wood squares. Thank you very much, Dollar Tree. So I had these wood coffee stirrers in my stash, but you can use the craft sticks from Dollar Tree to do this too. I stained them with that same Ipswich pine stain and then cut them to size to fit on the 4 exposed edges on each of the 4 wood squares. I used some hot glue to then attach the cut pieces of stir sticks to cover those ugly, unfinished edges of the exposed wood squares. And Dollar Tree, if you are listening, please consider making the edges of those cut wood squares that come in a pack more finished so that they look better. Thank you for listening. And these are my tumbling tower block square shelves, or 2-tiered trays. I love the stained color of the wood, and these modern tiered trays look so sleek, but with this rustic wood vibe. They're super neutral and would work with so many different decor styles. Useful for candles or small plants or greenery, or any decorative object really. A simple and quick DIY with lots of functional uses. For this DIY, we're using a total of 114 of the dreaded brown tumbling tower blocks from Dollar Tree. You guys knew I had to fit in a brown tumbling tower block DIY, didn't you? You knew it. Well, I won't disappoint you. First, we are making 4 of these 12 block squares, each square made up of 4 sets of 3 blocks that are attached side by side. And you can pause the video or you can slow down the video if you want to see the exact configurations of these 4 large squares of 12 blocks. Then I am making 7 sets of 3 blocks each. These are all going to be sandwiched together, one on top of another, as you can see right here. Next, I'm making 9 sets of 2 blocks that are sandwiched one on top of another, like a sandwich cookie, and then another set of 9 sets of 2 blocks. I'm going to just repeat the whole thing. It's also sandwiched one on top of another. And with the 18 sets of 2 blocks, I'm then going to start to combine them, 2 sets of 2 to make 1 set of 4. glued one on top of another, and I apologize that the bottom of the video was totally cut off, so you can't see all of the sets that I'm attaching, but you're gonna have to take my word for what's going on. So in the end, we're gonna end up with 9 sets of 4 blocks, as you can see I do at the end. I take those 9 sets of 4 blocks and I'm attaching them together end to end into a very long line, doing my best to keep the line as straight as I can. It wasn't perfect, but neither am I. I take 9 single blocks and I'm going to place 1 block on top of each of those attached 4 block sets that are standing on their sides. And I'm going to allow all the pieces some time to dry. Once all my pieces are dry, I've been sanding these lovely brown blocks lately and loving how they look sanded down. However, for whatever reason, these brown blocks did not sand down the same way. They just looked muddy, like dusty and muddy. I'm hoping it's just this batch and that the next couple of boxes will sand correctly, but it didn't work for this project, so I needed a plan B. So my plan B is to use this Folk Art Butter Pecan paint and a dry chip brush to distress paint over the brown blocks. Honestly, it doesn't look as good as the sanded blocks usually do, but we gotta do what we gotta do and make it work. So I started by distress painting the 3 block sets, then painted the 4 12 block squares, and lastly, the long 45 block piece that we created, distress painting all the sides and particularly the edges and corners to add a little visual interest to that solid brown color. To begin assembling the project, I take 3 of the 3 block sets lying on their sides and I place the long 45 block piece placed on top of the 3 block sets, and they're spaced out evenly underneath it just to give it some height. And I'm going to glue those 3 block sets in place with some wood glue. Then I take the remaining 4 3 block sets that I have, and I'm going to glue them to the center of each of my large 12 block squares. They're going to be centered right in the middle of the square. Lastly, I attach the 4 12 block squares to that long 45 block piece that we have, and I'm spacing the 4 squares out as evenly as I can just by eyeballing them. And this is my tumbling tower block candelabra, or it could also be a 4-tier plant holder. Just a cool looking wood block decor piece that works on a shelf or a windowsill or a mantle, blending in seamlessly with multiple home decor styles, and yet another DIY using those abundant brown tumbling tower blocks. I just can't stop using them in these videos. For this DIY, we are using a total of 54 of the natural color tumbling tower blocks from Dollar Tree and super glue wood glue also from Dollar Tree. To begin with, I'm making 2 U shapes and I'm using 3 blocks each, so that's 2 sets of 3, as you see me doing right here, and I am placing 2 single blocks in between the 2 U shapes, one on each side. So now it looks like an O with 2 blocks that are in the middle of it. I'm going to repeat that exact same thing one more time. So I'm going to end up with 2 of these identical O shapes, both of which have the 2 single blocks in the middle of both sides of the O, as you can see right here. Next, I'm making 4 sets of 3 blocks that are all going to be attached end to end. Now, I'm going to be needing a total of 6 of these 3 block sets, but for now, I'm only making 4 of them for the time being. Then I'm going to be making 8 sets of 2 blocks that are also going to be attached end to end. So once again, that is 8 sets of 2 blocks. I take one of the 3-block sets and I'm going to make a U-shape by attaching a 2-block set on each side of that 3-block set. And then I'm going to repeat that again, so I have 2 matching larger U-shapes. I take my 2 O shapes that we made earlier and I'm going to place them inside those 2 U shapes that we just made, as you see me doing right here. Taking another 3-block set and 2 of the 2-block sets, I make another large U shape that will fit beneath the O shape in the middle, and repeat that again for another large U shape for my second O shape. And I'm going to place that underneath the O shape. With my 2 sides that are laid out in front of me, I take a single block and I'm going to glue it to the middle of the top U shape on the first side, and then I'm going to repeat that again with another single block on the top U shape on the second side. I take that middle O shape on the first side and I'm going to add some glue to the middle top and the top ends of the 2 single blocks on the sides, and I'm going to attach that middle piece to the top U shape. Then I attach a single block to the middle of the bottom of that O shape and add some glue to the ends of the bottom U shape and attach the bottom to the middle piece, completing that first side. And I know it sounds more complicated than it actually is. You can always pause the video or replay if you need to. I repeat the exact same thing again on the second side. So I'm going to end up with these 2 matching window pane kind of looking, they look like a window pane kind of looking sides. And here's where I make 2 more of those 3-block sets that I mentioned earlier. They are attached end to end. And with that, we've used a total of 54 of these natural color tumbling tower blocks. Next, I've made a mixture of hot water with some strong, cheap instant coffee to use as a stain for my blocks. I like using the instant coffee to stain these natural color tumbling tower blocks because it gives me a really warm but still very sheer brown color with all of the natural wood grain still coming through, plus it dries super quick. I start by staining the 2 3-block sets on all sides and on the ends. And then I'm going to move on to staining both of my large window pane looking sides that we've created, making sure that all the areas are covered with the stain, including those inside edges and all of those ends, before I set the whole thing aside to fully dry. I have one of these small bamboo cutting boards that's from Dollar Tree, and I mix some water with apple barrel matte white paint, which I will link for you below, to make a whitewash, to paint the cutting board and just to give it just like a tinge of white color, but still leaving the wood tone showing through. And I did 2 coats of that whitewash on my cutting board. I used that same white matte paint, but this time without any water, along the edge of my cutting board, just to kind of highlight it, and I wanted to add some contrast between that edge and the board. Once that coffee stain had dried, I take those 2 3-block sets that I made later on, and I'm going to glue them to the top and to the bottom middle of one of the window pane looking sides, as you see me doing right here, and then I put that aside so that it would dry. Once they were mostly dry, I glue those 2 3-block sets to the second window pane looking side and allow it to fully dry for several hours. Once those 2 sides dried together, I turn my cutting board upside down and, using some loose blocks just as spacers, they are not part of the project, I add some glue to the top of those 2 sides and center it onto the bottom of my cutting board, using the spacer blocks to help keep it centered, and I allow this whole thing to dry overnight. And this is my tall tumbling tower block pedestal riser, and oh my gosh, you guys, I love this riser. I'm so in love with the pattern of the blocks, and I really like the light brown stain combined with that whitewash. It looks spring-like to me, so fresh, and such an upscale decor item that works so well in so many different kinds of decor styles. Neutral enough to really blend seamlessly anywhere. Love it for candles or plants or any other kinds of decorative items. This DIY is a tumbling tower block winner. For this quick DIY, we're using a total of 18 of the dreaded brown tumbling tower blocks from Dollar Tree, as well as the super glue wood glue, also from Dollar Tree. You all knew I'd throw in a brown block DIY, didn't you? Well, I wasn't going to disappoint you. So now ultimately we're going to be making 3 sets of 6 blocks, which totals 18 blocks in the whole project. So we start by making 2 sets of 3 blocks. They are attached side by side. And then I take 2 of these sets of 3 and I'm going to attach them end to end for 1 set of 6 blocks. As you see right here, hopefully that made sense to you. I repeat that 2 more times until I have these 3 sets of 6 blocks that are all attached the exact same way. And again, that's a total of 18 blocks used. Once my 3 sets of 6 are dry, I am using a sanding sponge to sand down the brown blocks, and thankfully, this bunch of brown blocks are sanding down really nicely, unlike the blocks I used in last week's video, which, if you saw the video, did not sand down the same way. They were very muddy and messy looking, so I had to paint them. These brown blocks are from a brand new case of blocks directly from the Dollar Tree website, so hopefully, fingers crossed, the rest of the case will also sand down as nicely as these do. The brown blocks in general, in my opinion, look so much better when they are sanded and distressed. I have this square wood box, which is part of a wood drawer set from Dollar Tree. I'm using the outer part of the drawer set for this project, not the little inner box that usually has a shape cut out of it, if you know what I mean. I'm using this apple barrel white gloss paint, which I will link for you below, to paint both the inside of the box and the outside of the box. I ended up doing 2 or maybe 3 coats of the white gloss for full coverage on the box, and I set it aside to fully dry. To begin assembling, I'm attaching one of the 6 block sets to each side of the third 6 block set that's placed on the bottom, as you see right there, to create this U shape, and I give that some time for it to dry. Once those 3 sets of blocks were dry, I add some wood glue to the inside of each side. And I'm going to carefully slide the painted wood box in between the 2 block sets so that the block sets come up about halfway up the sides of the wood box. And then I set that aside to fully dry overnight. And this is my Woodbox and tumbling tower block raised planter, and I'm always so pleased with the distressed look of the sanded brown blocks, and this is no different. I especially love the look of the sanded blocks against a glossy crisp white wood box. I think they look great together, and this little mini raised planter really packs a punch decor-wise. So easy and so impressive looking. I also think it would look great in a set of 2 or even more. For this DIY, we are using a grand total of 90 of the natural color tumbling tower blocks from Dollar Tree for this project. I'm also going to be using the super glue wood glue, also from Dollar Tree, to attach the blocks together. So first, we are making a set of 3 blocks that are going to be glued side by side, as you can see here. Then I add 3 more blocks directly on top of those 3 blocks, and then another set of 3 directly on top of the second set to make this set of 9 blocks that are assembled in 3 rows of 3 groups of 3. And we're going to repeat this exact same thing 9 more times for a total of 10 sets of 9 blocks that are comprised of 30 sets of 3 blocks. I know that sounds complicated. It's really not, I promise, until I have this nice stack of 10 sets of 9, and I'm going to set them all aside so that they fully dry. Also for this project, I'm using 2 of these wood rectangles that come in a pack from Dollar Tree. I'm using these wood coffee stir sticks. I got them on Amazon and I'll link them for you below, But you can also use the wood craft sticks from Dollar Tree to do this as well. I cut the sticks to fit around one of my wood rectangles to create a frame, and then I use some wood glue to attach the sticks to the rectangle to frame it in and to hide those ugly edges, because Dollar Tree doesn't really finish the edges on these wood shapes very nicely. We were all thinking it. I'm just the one saying it. I'm only going to frame in one of the wood rectangles, not both, because one of them is on the bottom of the project and the framed one, the one that's framed in, is going to be the top, which is going to be more visible in the finished project. I mixed up equal parts hot water and some cheap instant coffee to make a stain for me to use to stain all the wood pieces of this project. I like to use a coffee stain because it really enhances the warm wood tones while still giving a sheer finish and letting all the wood grain show through. I started by staining all 10 of my 9-block sets that have dried, staining both sides and both edges, as well as those very thirsty ends on the blocks. They really soak up the coffee, and I let them dry. In general, the coffee stain dries super quick because it's not a real stain, it's just coffee, and they smell really good too. That's just a bonus. Then I coffee stain that bottom rectangle, the one without the frame, on both sides and on those ugly unfinished edges. Before moving on to that top rectangle with the wood stir stick frame, I'm staining both sides of the rectangle and all of those stir stick framed sides as well. I'm giving it a full coverage of the coffee stain. I got these small wood letter tiles on Amazon, and I'll link them for you below. They're like the Scrabble tiles, but they're without a letter. You may be able to find something similar at Dollar Tree, like those Scrabble tape wood letter tiles. These are slightly smaller than 1 inch, and I grab 8 of them, and I'm going to glue 2 tiles together, one on top of another. I decided to use these as feet on the bottom of that bottom rectangle, just so that I could give the project a little bit of height. I also decided to stain the 4 wood tile feet with that same coffee stain that I used on the rest of the pieces of the project. So now each side of my project uses 5 of these 9-block sets that we made, and they're staggered in a zigzag pattern, one on top of another, as you can see right here in that first completed side that we've already done. To assemble the second side, like we did the first side, we place a pile of 3 blocks next to the bottom set. The 3 blocks are just spacers to support the side as it dries. They don't stay in the final project. I'm using 2 blocks, one flat and one on its side, as spacers to place the second row of blocks, as you can see right there. And I add glue to the open space on that first set of 9 blocks on the bottom, and add our second set of 9 blocks right on top of that, as you see me doing right here. Now we're going to repeat that same thing, but in the reverse direction. We're using the 3 spacers on the opposite side of that second set of blocks, and the 2 brown block spacers on the other side. We're placing the glue in the open space on that second set of blocks, and then we're going to be adding the third set of blocks right on top of that. This creates that staggered effect. We're going to continue that staggered zigzag placement on the remaining 2 sets of blocks, using up all of our 5 sets of blocks to complete this mirrored version of the first side. And with that, we have 2 completed sides of the project. To add those 4 wood tile feet to the bottom, I take that bottom unframed rectangle and I'm going to turn it upside down to the less attractive side and use some loose blocks in the corners just to try and evenly space out my 4 feet before using some wood glue to attach the 4 wood tile feet to those 4 corners of the bottom of the rectangle. And then I'm going to set the whole thing aside to dry. With both of those zigzag sides, they're now completely dry. I turn the bottom rectangle over with the feet on the bottom and use some more loose blocks and some small pencil markings to try and space out where to place my two zigzag sides so that they will be evenly placed on the rectangle. I didn't measure it. I just did my best eyeballing it. I'm using some E6000 glue for its super strong hold on the bottom of the two block sides. And then I place them down onto the top of that bottom rectangle, sliding and adjusting them until they look evenly placed on that rectangle. The E6000 takes a while to dry, so you have some wiggle room to move the pieces around and adjust their position to your liking. Then I add more E6000 to the tops of each side before placing my top framed in rectangle on top of the two sides, allowing it to dry overnight. And this is my gorgeous zigzag tumbling tower block platform riser. I think this thing is stunning. I mean, I really love it. And I love the natural wood finish on it. This DIY is a true example of Dollar Tree supplies creating an upscale piece of decor. All boxes checked here. This one's a keeper. For this DIY, we'll be using a total of 23 of the brown tumbling tower blocks from Dollar Tree. The blocks we love to hate, as well as the super glue wood glue, also from Dollar Tree. And here I'm using 12 of them and creating sets of 3 blocks glued side to side. I'll be making 4 of these 3 block sets that are all glued the exact same way. Now, the idea was to sand these 4 sets of 3 blocks, but I realized that these brown blocks were from a batch I used last week, and they are virtually unsandable. They just get muddy and they get dusty brown looking, so I stopped. I threw them out, and I remade my 4 sets of 3 blocks from a brand new box of blocks. Also, from that brand new box of blocks, I grabbed 12 of these loose blocks. Even though I only used 11 of them, and you'll see that later on, I sanded my 12 single blocks, and these sand down very nicely. As you can see, they just take on a lovely rustic distressed look, and I sand both sides and both edges on each of these 12 blocks. Then I sand the 4 sets of 3 blocks from that new box of blocks, the exact same way as the single blocks, giving them a nice rustic, distressed look that's just filled with character. I sand them on both sides and both edges of all 4 sets. I take my 4 sets of 3 and I assemble them into a square shape, standing up on their ends, and then use some wood glue to attach them that way. I have this cardboard tube from my recycling bin, and it's smaller and it's stronger than a paper towel roll. It's more like an aluminum foil roll or something like that. I use a box cutter to cut a piece off that's shorter than my single blocks are when they are standing up on their end. I take some wood glue and I attach 11 of those sanded single blocks standing up the tall way, and I'm gluing them all around that cardboard tube. I did try and use all 12 blocks, but you can see that the 12th block just didn't fit. It won't fit. So I ended up using just 11 blocks in total. Meanwhile, I have these 2 wood pencil cups. One is square, one is circular. I got them on Amazon and I'll link them for you below, but I believe you can find some wood square and circular cups that are similar at Dollar Tree, sometimes, depending on your Dollar Tree. I want to paint both cups with some apple barrel white gloss paint, which I will link for you below. And I started by painting the insides on both cups and also the top lips on both cups. Then I painted the outside of both cups, and I did 2 coats of the white gloss paint for full coverage, but I will say that even with 2 coats, both of my cups still had some of that natural wood grain coming through the paint. And I actually really liked the look of the wood grain showing through the white, so I stopped at 2 coats of paint. Once dry, I turned the square cup upside down and applied some E6000 glue for strength to the top edge of the square that we made out of 3-block sets. And I centered it on the bottom of the square wood cup and allowed that to dry overnight. I did the same thing with the circular cup and the cardboard tube with the attached blocks. And this is my set of tumbling tower block and wood planters, or you could also use them as cups for pencils, pens, or makeup or paintbrushes, anything really. But I'm loving the distressed brown blocks contrasting with the crisp, clean white, especially the way it looks when styled with greenery. Just a lovely neutral wood decor set that works with everyone's home decor style. For this DIY, we'll be using a total of 68 of the brown tumbling tower blocks from Dollar Tree and the super glue wood glue, also a staple at Dollar Tree. To begin with, I'm making 11 sets of 2 blocks. They are all attached from end to end, as you can see me doing right here. To begin assembling this first side of the project, I'm standing my 11 sets of 2 blocks up on their ends the tall way, and we are gluing them together in this kind of zigzag or an accordion style pattern, just like you see me doing right here. And you can always pause the video or replay any of the parts if you need to follow along with me. Next, I made another group of 11 sets of 2 blocks that are all attached from end to end, exactly the same as the first group. And I then attached that group of 11 sets of 2 blocks together the same way as the first side that we've just made. I am standing them up on their ends the tall way and attaching them together in this zigzag accordion style pattern. So I now have 2 matching sides of 11 sets of 2 blocks. At the last minute, I also decided to make a back wall for the project to fit in between my 2 sides. So I created 12 more sets of 2 blocks, the exact same way I had made both of the 11 sets of blocks, and then attached those together the exact same way as the 2 side walls we just made. But the back wall is slightly wider than the sides because we used 12 sets of blocks instead of using 11. This brings our grand total of blocks used to 68, as I mentioned to you before. I've mentioned in previous videos how much I love the look of these less than attractive brown blocks, so much better when they are sanded down and distressed. So that's what I decided to do here. Using the sanding sponge, I thoroughly sanded the 3 walls of blocks that we've created on all sides and edges, distressing them down to a lovely rustic wood look. It's kind of a messy undertaking, and I'm covered in brown dust, but the results are worth the mess, in my opinion. I have this bamboo cutting board from Dollar Tree, and I mixed some hot water with equal parts of very strong and very cheap instant coffee to create a stain to use on my cutting board. I like using coffee to stain my wood, and bamboo in this case, because it gives the wood some warm wood color while still being sheer and allowing that grain to really show through. Plus, it dries fast and it smells really good. If you like coffee, I gave the board 2 to 3 coats of coffee on both sides and the edges and used a dry paper towel to rub the excess liquid away in between the coats of coffee. To assemble my final project, I stand my 3 walls up with that longer 12 set row in the back, and I'm going to attach each of my 2 sets of 11 to that 12 set of 2 blocks, the one that's the back wall, using some wood glue, and I allowed that to dry for several hours before I continued. Lastly, I added some wood glue to the top of my U-shaped base and then carefully centered my bamboo cutting board on top of that base, and I allowed that whole thing to fully dry overnight. And this is my tumbling tower block and bamboo cutting board riser. And I'm telling you that I did not have a Dollar Tree brown tumbling tower block DIY every week on my bingo card for 2025, but it looks like it's shaping up to be just that. You guys, we used them again, and I, for one, am very pleased with the result. I really hope you are too. For this DIY, we are using the natural color tumbling tower blocks from Dollar Tree and the super glue wood glue also from Dollar Tree. We'll be using a total of 80 blocks for this project. And to start with, we're making a set of 16 blocks that are attached together in 4 different columns of 4 blocks each, as you can see right here. I then attach those 4 columns of 4 blocks each, end to end. Then I add some wood glue directly on top of that set of 16 blocks and add another 16 blocks on top of that, giving us a set of 32 blocks in this little wall of blocks that we've now created. I take 8 more blocks and attach one set of 4 glued side by side and glue the other 4 directly on top of that, creating a set of 8. I repeat that one more time the exact same way, giving me 2 sets of 32 blocks and 2 sets of 8 blocks, or 80 blocks in total. To assemble the project, I stand up my 2 32-block walls and place the 2 8-block sides between them, as you see me doing here, and I'm going to glue them in place, creating this solid, thick, open rectangle shape, and I'm going to set that aside so it fully dries. While the block rectangle is drying, I grab 4 of these small wood cubes from a pack at Dollar Tree, and I mixed some Dollar Tree gray acrylic paint with plain water to create this gray wash to paint my 4 wood cubes, just giving them a little sheer wash of gray and plenty of that wood tone still showing through. Then I allow them all to dry. I wanted to give my block rectangle a base coat of white, so I'm using this Folk Art white chalk paint, which I'll link for you below, to cover the wood on the blocks and to make it a solid white color. I painted the inside of the rectangle as well as all of the sides and edges of the outside, and I gave it a couple of minutes to dry. Then, using that same white chalk paint, I mixed the paint in a cup with a whole bunch of baking soda to create this grainy, textured white paint. And I did a second coat of the textured paint all over the block rectangle on the inside and on the outside, really loading on that texture until the block rectangle kind of takes on the look of a very industrial or modern white concrete cinder block, or at least that's the look that I felt that it had. And when that texture paint had dried, I took it outside to spray it with this Montana Granite texture spray, which I will link for you below. Lastly, once the granite texture dried, I turned the rectangle upside down and used some hot glue to attach the 4 wood cubes to the bottom as feet for the project, spacing them out with some loose blocks to help place them in the correct spaces. And this is my faux granite or concrete riser made out of tumbling tower blocks. And I love the modern kind of industrial feel of this decor piece. It really does have a stone or a concrete look, and you'd never guess it started out being made out of wood blocks. I'd love this to display some candles or planters, perfect on a coffee or console table in a living or dining room. Upscale, but simple, clean, and elegant. For this DIY, I'm using this empty baby food jar from my recycling bin because, as you all know, my little puppy, Ellie May, loves her beef baby food, so we have plenty of empty jars. I'm also using a total of 36 of the natural color tumbling tower blocks from Dollar Tree and also the super glue wood glue from Dollar Tree. So to begin with, I'm gluing the blocks standing up the tall way around the entire jar, as you see me doing here, and it takes 12 blocks to go all around that jar. Then I'm adding another set of 12 blocks that are glued directly on top of those, going around the jar, also standing up the tall way. Followed by yet another row of 12 blocks directly on top of the second row, the same as we did before, and this third is the final row, and with that we've used 36 of these tumbling tower blocks. I've got this tube of caulk from Dollar Tree, and here is where I think I went wrong. I wanted to fill in all the grooves between the blocks going down and also across, kind of like bricks or tiles with grout. I used the caulk purely because it was in a tube, and I thought it'd be easier to apply into all those little cracks and maybe be neater to clean off the surface of the blocks than spackle would be. However, this stuff is not that easy to use, and also once it dries, it's very hard to sand and remove the dried caulk off the surface of the blocks and on the edges. So, moral of this story is, do as I say and not as I do. So I am recommending that you use spackle or even actual grout to do this part instead of using this caulk. And as I mentioned before, it was impossible to sand the dried caulk, so I ended up going outside and using a Dremel to grind the dried caulk off the block surfaces. And I repeat, that spackle would have been easier to sand and smooth out without using any power tools. I'm using some Varathane wood stain in the color Golden Oak, and I'll link that for you below to stain all the blocks. I did one coat of stain and then wiped the excess liquid off with a dry paper towel before going back in with a second coat of stain. I wasn't worried about staining the caulk lines because I have something else in mind for them later on. I'm also not worried about the inside blocks because they won't be seen at all in the final project. I have this thick wood round I got on Amazon, and I'll link it for you below. It's about 4 inches across, but you could also use those round wood plaques from Dollar Tree to do this if you prefer. I am staining the wood round with that same Golden Oak wood stain color as I did the blocks so that they'll all match. And I stained the wood round on both sides and also around that edge just for a cohesive look. I wasn't happy with the look of the quote-unquote grout lines after I stained those wood blocks, so I decided to paint all the grout lines with this Folk Art acrylic paint in the color Camel. I start by painting the lines going from top to bottom all around the block cylinder, and then I paint the tiny grout lines going across the cylinder, sort of making the tiny lines look larger and more even with those longer vertical lines. And I'm really emphasizing that brick or tile-like look that I was going for. To add the stained wood round to the top of the cylinder, I used some wood glue around the top of those top wood blocks, and I centered that wood round directly on top. And then I'm going to allow it to fully dry. And this is my wood brick candle holder or plant holder or simply a wood pedestal. I really do love the way the blocks look as stained bricks or even as ceramic tiles. It's just a really upscale, substantial kind of look, made out of tumbling tower blocks and an empty baby food jar. I do recommend using spackle or even real grout instead of the caulk for the reasons I've shown you, but a simple project with a sophisticated outcome. For this DIY, we are using a total of 84 of the brown tumbling tower blocks from Dollar Tree. And to start out, I have 6 rows of 6 blocks that are stacked up side by side. We'll be attaching the 6 rows using some super glue wood glue, also from Dollar Tree. Once I've attached that first row of 6 blocks together, I move on to the next 5 rows of 6 blocks and attach them together the exact same way as I did with the first row. This is leaving me with 6 rows of 6 blocks, as you can see right here. Next, I'm going to attach those 6 rows of 6 blocks to each other, side by side, to form one large rectangular shape made out of 36 blocks. I take 36 more blocks and I'm going to be layering them right on top of the block rectangle that we just made. So now we have a 2-layer thick rectangle shape made out of 72 of these brown blocks, and I give it some time to fully dry. I take 12 more blocks, bringing our total to 84 of the blocks that we've used, and I'm going to make 6 groups of 2 blocks that are sandwiched one on top of another, and I'm going to set those aside to dry. When the glued blocks have dried, I take this Deco Art Americana black acrylic paint, which I will link for you below, and I start by painting the 6 groups of 2 blocks, giving them 1 coat of paint on all of the sides and on the edges. Then I'm going to move on to my 72 block thick rectangle shape, and I'm painting that with the same 1 coat of black paint, painting both of the sides and all of the edges and the ends with the black paint. Just one coat, and I put them all aside to fully dry. When all that black paint has dried, I grab this sanding sponge and I want to thoroughly sand all the edges, the corners, the fronts, and the backs of the black painted blocks so that lots of that brown finish on the blocks can be seen. And I start by sanding these 6 2-block sets, and I'm sanding them thoroughly. Then I move on to sand that large 2-layer rectangle shape, really giving it some elbow grease and distressing the crap out of it, for lack of a better word. I just really want to see the wood beneath the black so that this piece will have 2 tones. I was actually hoping for more of the brown color to come through, but a lot of that was sanded off too, leaving a lot of the lighter natural wood showing through. So I had to fix those really light colored spots to ultimately get the colors that I was going for. And you can see the end result did give me that brown and black distressed look, but it did look too light and over sanded in some of the areas. So to bring back some more brown onto those light spots, I grabbed some Faux antique wax that I had diluted with water to thin it out, and I painted the wax and water mixture over those light spots just to deepen and darken the color down a little bit, giving me the black and brown 2-tone effect that I originally wanted. Once the antique wax was dry, I turned my rectangle over, and on the bottom side, I'm using some E6000 glue because I want this to be really strong. I'm attaching my 6 2-block sets to the bottom to use as legs, and I space them evenly onto the bottom of the rectangle and then let the glue dry for several hours before continuing. When the E6000 dried, I have this Rust-Oleum gloss lacquer spray, which I'll link for you below, and I took the piece outside and sprayed it, then let it dry for about an hour. And yes, it did make the piece glossy, but I wanted even more gloss on the top. So I am using this Mod Podge Dimensional Magic, which I will link for you below. I've used this before for jewelry projects. It's like a puff paint, but it's totally clear and glossy. So it gives a ton of shine and dimension to the project. Kind of like a resin, but easier to use. It's cloudy when you apply it. I know it looks blue on the video for some reason, but it's actually a white cloudy look that will be crystal clear when it dries. And this is how you apply it, like painting on little puffy bubbles on top of each block. It's a little time consuming, but very easy to work with, and it takes about 3 hours for it to fully dry. And this is my absolutely gorgeous 2-tone ultra shiny wood riser. There is so much about this that I love. The blocks with their 3-dimensional gloss look almost like ceramic tile. Plus, the brown and black tones are really giving me a tortoiseshell or like alligator kind of vibe. I don't know if you can see that too, but the whole piece is giving a really high-end and maybe slightly Asian decor vibe. It's just stunning as far as I'm concerned. Honestly, this for me is one of those projects that so far exceeded my expectations that it makes up for every DIY fail I've ever had so far. This brown tumbling tower block DIY is a classic. For this DIY, we will be using a grand total of 90 of the natural color tumbling tower blocks from Dollar Tree for this project, as well as the super glue wood glue also from Dollar Tree. And we begin by making 9 sets of 3 blocks that are all attached side by side, as you can see right here. And I'm wiping away any excess glue as I go along so it won't mess up our stain later on. Once I have my 9 sets of 3 blocks, I'm going to attach them together in a 3x3 square. That's 3 rows of 3. And I alternate the direction that the blocks are going with each set. Again, I'm wiping away any excess glue from the surface of the blocks before it dries. And when that is complete, I'm going to repeat that whole thing all over again to create another identical 3x3 square using 9 more sets of 3. Then I make a third piece, but this one is going to be made of 12 of those groups of 3 blocks instead of 9. So it'll be a rectangular shape that is 4x3 instead of a square. We want this third one to be longer than the other 2. And with that, we have used a total of 90 of these tumbling tower blocks. And here are my 3 main pieces, the 2 3x3 squares and the 3x4 rectangle. And to assemble this project, I'm going to start by gluing one of the squares to the top of one side of the rectangle, as you can see me doing right here. And that's going to be followed by the second square on the other side of the rectangle. And I put something behind both sides to support them while that glue is setting up. I had these 4 small wood beads in my stash, kind of like the kind that you can get at Dollar Tree, and I'm going to glue them onto the 4 bottom corners of the project just to give it a little lift. I also decided to reinforce the underside of the project, so I grabbed 2 wood craft sticks from Dollar Tree and I glued them across the 2 seams on the bottom just to give a tiny bit of added support. I decided to stain the whole project using this Rattan wood stain in the color Golden Oak, which I will link for you below. And I ended up using some tiny little makeup brushes to apply the stain because for the life of me, I could not find a foam brush anywhere in my house, which is so weird because I always have some lying around. But anyway, I had to make it work. So I stained the entire piece, the underneath, as well as all the sides, edges, and the little wood bead feet with the Golden Oak, using a dry paper towel to rub the excess stain off, and then give the whole piece several hours for that stain to fully dry. And this is my tumbling tower block plant stand or large candle holder or cubby shelf, whatever you want to call it. It's pretty strong and functional, and I kind of like the pattern of the blocks and the stain color together. And sure, it might look like someone's parquet flooring, but that's okay. I like its rustic charm and patchwork-like feel. For this DIY, we'll be using a total of 24 of the infamous brown tumbling tower blocks from Dollar Tree. I'm also using this super glue wood glue from Dollar Tree to attach them. And to begin with, I'm making 2 sets of 5 blocks that are all attached end to end in a straight line, as you can see me doing right here. Next, we'll be making 2 sets of 2 blocks also attached end to end. However, I needed to extend their length just a tiny bit, so I got a couple of pieces of these wood coffee stir sticks. I got them on Amazon, but you can use the wood craft sticks from Dollar Tree if you prefer. I glued 2 of the craft stick pieces on the top of one of the blocks, and then I repeated that a second time. I glued one of the blocks to a block with that added stick piece on top, and I repeated that for a second set of 2 blocks. Then I create a second set of all of the block pieces that we just made, as you can see here. So I've got 4 sets of 5 blocks and 4 sets of 2 blocks for a total of 24 blocks. I attached one of the 2-block sets to one of the 5-block sets using a ruler to keep it as straight as possible, and then attached the second set of 2 to the other side of that 5-block set, also using the ruler to make this long U shape. And I wanted it to be as straight as I possibly could make it. I repeated that long U shape with the second set of 5 blocks attached to the 2 sets of 2 blocks, the same exact way, using the ruler to keep it all as straight as possible, and then I'm going to set all the pieces aside to dry. I grabbed 2 of these wood rectangles that come in a pack from Dollar Tree, as well as 2 of these Woodbox bottoms. They're also from Dollar Tree. They come with tops. We don't need the tops. I had to use a previously used Woodbox for one of them, but that's okay because we are painting them all anyway, so recycling is fine. I took all the block pieces and the rectangles and the wood boxes outside to spray paint them using this Rust-Oleum black gloss paint, which I'll link for you below. And while I was out there, I decided to paint the insides of the 2 wood boxes with some white glossy spray paint before painting the outsides of the boxes and the rest of the pieces with the black paint. To begin assembling, I glue the long U shape to the center of one of those wood rectangles. As you can see me doing here, I am doing my best to center it just by eyeballing it and not measuring. You know how it is, with some space at the top of the U shape as well as the bottom of the U shape. And then I'm going to repeat that on the second rectangle and U-shaped block piece. And I am using E6000 for this. I don't know if I mentioned that earlier, but I am. Then I take one of the wood boxes, and with the open space facing downwards, I center it onto the wood blocks that are attached to the wood rectangle, about 2/3 of the way up from the bottom. Then I repeat that again with the second wood box and the second wood block and rectangle piece, the exact same way as the first one. I take another 5-block set and attach it over the wood box, and it's attached to the 2 ends on those two 2-block sets, repeating that a second time on the second wood box and block piece. I grabbed 2 of these battery-operated push lights from Dollar Tree, and I used the adhesive bottoms on the lights to attach them inside each of my wood boxes. And this is my set of tumbling tower block and Woodbox sconces. I love the black glossy look combined with the glossy white insides of the boxes, and the white color really enhances the brightness from the push light, making these wood sconces pretty bright for what they are. I think that these would look amazing mounted on a wall with some command strips on the back of the rectangle bases, and are just perfect on both sides of a bedroom door or any wall opening, or flanking some wall decor. Easy, upscale, and made out of all Dollar Tree products. A perfect DIY. For this DIY, we'll be using a total of 96 of the natural color tumbling tower blocks from Dollar Tree, as well as the super glue wood glue also from Dollar Tree. And to start, I'm making one group of 6 blocks in the formation that I'm showing you here. It's 2 blocks that are attached side by side, and then 1 block placed on either side of the 2 blocks. And they are placed about halfway on each side, and it's important that these 2 side blocks are even with each other. Then I'm going to attach 2 more blocks on either side of those 2 blocks, also placed about halfway up and even with each other. So we end up with this set of 6 blocks that looks kind of like a wide Y shape. And I'm just using a ruler and another block to try and make sure that the blocks on the sides of the 2 middle blocks are at least even with one another. That's kind of an important part, and hopefully that makes sense to you. I repeat that whole procedure a second time, starting with 2 blocks attached side by side again, and I actually place the 2 middle blocks on top of my completed 6-block set, so that when I add the 2 additional blocks on each side, I can line them up in exactly the same position as the first set of 6 blocks, so that these 2 sets of 6 blocks are identical to each other. At least as identical as a Dollar Tree wood block will allow me to be. Those of us that know that these blocks are not perfect, unfortunately, but we make do. And I do my best here to make the 2 sets of 6 blocks identical to one another. I'm going to follow that up with a 3rd set of 6 blocks, which we put together the same way as the first 2 sets, also placed on top of the other 2 sets like we did before to try and keep them even, or as even as possible. I make a 4th set of the 6 blocks, and you guessed it, we're going to do it the exact same way, and this one is also placed on top of the other 3 to keep the placement the same. I think you get the picture here. To begin assembling, I turn one of the 6-block sets upside down, and I'm going to attach the 2 sets together by gluing the 4 end blocks to one another, as you can see me doing right here. So now it looks like we have this large empty plus sign space right in the middle of the 2 6-block sets. I'm going to add a 3rd set to the bottom of that, and I'm really only attaching it by gluing the 2 edges of 2 of those side blocks to the 2 edges of the side blocks on the other piece. Now, this does not make the connection very sturdy, and I do add some more glue to the other 2 inner edge blocks later. I don't know why I didn't do it at the beginning, but I did it later, which you will see why that was a problem, and I needed to fix it later in the video. But for now, we attached those 2 edge pieces to the rest of the piece. I spin the whole piece around, and I'm going to attach that 4th set to the bottom of the other side, the same as we attached the 3rd set on the opposite side, just gluing those 2 edges. But I do change that up later, as I have mentioned, and I glue the other 2 block edges that touch underneath it. This is one finished side of the whole project. And I repeat that whole thing 3 more times so that I will have 4 of these pieces made up of 4 sets of 6 blocks using a total of 96 tumbling tower blocks. I'm using equal parts hot water and strong instant coffee to coffee stain all 4 of the block pieces. I like using instant coffee as a stain because it dries really quick and it smells really good and just gives a nice warm wood tone while still letting all of the wood grain show through. I use a dry paper towel to soak up the excess liquid as I go, and I am staining all sides of the blocks as well as all the edges and the ends for total coverage. And while I was staining this first piece and the bottom set of 6 broke off, this is where I realized I needed to reinforce the connections between sets by adding glue to the other edge connections between the sets. And later on, I also added a dab of hot glue at all those edge connections as well, just to help me stabilize them a little bit more. And again, I'm staining all 4 of my block sets with the instant coffee on all sides, and I do fix the one that broke later on. Once dry, I'm going to attach the 4 pieces together into a square by using wood glue on the ends of each piece, starting with those first 2 pieces. And because, again, these blocks are never perfect, I did have to slide the 2 sides around to fit in such a way that the top and bottom edges would at least line up with one another, and they would be like the same length. I did the best that I could. I gave the first two sides a couple of minutes for the glue to set up and then attached the third side on the top of the bottom side using the wood glue. And again, I had to slide that side around a bit to keep the top and bottom edge of the piece in line with the top and bottom edges of the other two pieces. And then I placed a tall vase next to it to hold it in place as that glue set up. Now, in order to place that fourth and final side on the top, I needed to make two piles of loose blocks that were inside the square to help support the fourth side as it was drying, while also sliding that fourth side around to match up the top and bottom edges with the other three sides that I already glued together. Once the four sides were attached, I put the whole thing aside and I had to give it several hours for it to totally dry. While that dried, I have these two square wood panels I got on Amazon. I'll link them for you below, but just so that you know, these are the same size as the wood squares that come in a pack from Dollar Tree. So in a pinch, you could also use those for a slightly different look. I'm staining both of the wood panels using that same coffee stain so that the panels and the wood block pieces will all be the same color wood. I stain all sides of the panels, including the backs, all over. Then I put the two panels aside for that coffee stain to fully dry. I've got two of these battery-operated push lights from Dollar Tree, and I wanted them to blend in better with all that wood and not be so white. So I decided to use some alcohol ink to do this. I covered the middle of the lights with painter's tape. I'm using Tim Holtz alcohol ink in the color Caramel, which I will link for you below. I have this cheap makeup brush and some 91% alcohol, and using the ink like a watercolor with the alcohol being the water part, I apply the ink to the white part of the lights, just swirling the color around it, building the color up in layers, and after a while, the swirl marks from the brush start to give the ink color a wood-like appearance. I've done this wood look with alcohol inks a lot on my channel when I'm working with plastic or glass or ceramic surfaces. So just by building that color up over time, it's actually not a hard process, and it almost always looks great when it's finished. And always make sure you use gloves because alcohol ink is in fact ink and it will stain your hands or your clothes or any surface really. So please keep that in mind when you're working with it. Once that ink is dry, I remove the tape and I'm using a dab of hot glue on the bottom of each of the push lights and attaching the light to the inside of each of my panels so that I have two of these push lights inside of a wood panel. One is for the top of my lamp and one is going to be for the bottom of my lamp. My woodblock lampshade is dry and you can see that I had to glue some craft stick pieces to the bottom of some of my edges so that it would stand up straight because those darn Dollar Tree tumbling tower blocks just aren't perfectly straight. Don't know if I've mentioned that before. They need a little adjusting here and there, but that's okay. We are up to the task, right? Yes, I glue the four bottom edges of the wood lampshade to the top of one of my push light and wood panels so that it will stand up straight. And I'm going to fit the other wood panel and push light on the top, same as the bottom piece. And this is my stunning tumbling tower block table lamp. Oh my goodness, you guys, I love this. I think this is so gorgeous with the two push lights. This thing is so bright in the dark. It's not fully dark in the video, so you can't really tell how bright it is, but oh my, I just really like everything about how this looks. It gives off a really cool reflection from the cutout areas. The coffee stained wood is such a neutral and natural kind of upscale vibe. This totally looks like something you could have paid a lot of money for, but you didn't. A couple of boxes of blocks, some instant coffee, and some Dollar Tree push lights, and you have made yourself a high-end piece of home decor that will impress anyone that sees it. For this DIY, we're using a total of 78 of the infamous brown tumbling tower blocks from Dollar Tree, as well as the super glue wood glue, also from Dollar Tree. And to begin with, we are making two sets of 4 blocks that are attached end to end. Next, we are making 2 sets of 6 blocks that are also going to be attached end to end. Then we are making 1 large set of 12 blocks that's comprised of 2 rows of 6 blocks that are going to be attached end to end and then attached side to side. So 2 rows of 6 equaling 12 blocks. Next, I have a row of 18 blocks that we are going to be attaching side to side, but these are going to be in a zigzag pattern, kind of like a zipper. I use a small wood cube as a spacer on the bottom of the row, and I use a ruler to try and keep all my blocks even and uniform with each other down that entire row of 18 blocks. But true to form, there are many inconsistencies with these Dollar Tree blocks. Thanks, Dollar Tree. So we will have to do some fixing and adjusting at the end just to even everything out. I repeat that one more time with a second row of 18 zigzagged blocks and allow everything to fully dry. Once the glue is dry, I take a sanding sponge and, for lack of a better term, I am going to sand the crap out of all the pieces we've created, starting with the 2 sets of 4 blocks and that set of 12 blocks. And I'm going to be moving on to both of those 18 block zigzag sets. And then we're going to do the 2 long 6 block sets. I'm sanding the front, I'm sanding the back, and I'm sanding the sides on all of them. Plus, I sanded another 10 single brown blocks for use later for a total of 78 of these blocks used for the entire project. To begin assembling, I attach one of my zigzag sets to that 12 block set. Then I attach the other zigzag set to the bottom of that 12 block set. And as I place the frame pieces around the 2 middle zigzag pieces, you can see on the right, I had to add some pieces of craft stick to the 2 end blocks on both zigzag sets, as well as some craft stick pieces to the last block on the top 6 block set, because those pesky Dollar Tree irregular block sizes made it necessary to add the craft sticks in order to have my frame fit snugly around the 2 zigzags in the middle. I have dreams of someday finding that perfect unicorn box of tumbling tower blocks where every block is the exact same length and width and height of every other block in the box. These are the things I dream about. But moving on, I attach the 4 frame pieces around the zigzag middle, doing my best to fit everything together straight and evenly. I take 8 of those 10 single blocks that I sanded, and I'm going to create 4 L-shaped corner pieces, and then I set them aside so that they can dry. Once my large main piece had dried, I turned it over and I used some craft sticks on the underside to help stabilize the large rectangular piece and to keep everything together. Then I allowed those to dry. I glued 2 single blocks on either side in the middle of my rectangle. Lastly, I glued down the 4 L-shaped corner pieces I had made onto the 4 bottom corners of the rectangular zigzag block piece. And this is my sanded brown tumbling tower block raised tray, and just another way to make use of those brown tumbling tower blocks we love to hate. The sanded brown blocks are actually starting to grow on me, to be honest, and if Dollar Tree ever takes them away, I may miss them. Possibly, maybe, or not. Either way, I think this is a charming little tray and a nice wood decor piece for anyone's home. Versatile in its style and function, it works as a centerpiece or as a tray for plants on a windowsill, a mantle, or a shelf. The sanding of the brown blocks can really give them a new life, in my opinion, but you'll have to tell me what you think. For this DIY, we'll be using a grand total of 72 of the natural color tumbling tower blocks from Dollar Tree, as well as the super glue wood glue, also from Dollar Tree. And to begin with, I'm making sets of 2 blocks attached end to end, and there will be 21 sets of 2 blocks that are attached end to end for this project. I'm giving you the total of the sets, even though you might not see me make that amount of sets in the video. I am giving you the count that I used when the project is completed. Next, I'm making sets of 3 blocks, but the way these sets are attached, I'm attaching 1 block on its side and then 1 block flat and attached to the middle of that narrow block on its side. That's why I'm measuring the middle of the block with this ruler. I attach another flat block on the other side of the narrow block, giving me kind of a plus sign shape with the 3 blocks, as you can see. And all in all, I'm making 8 sets of these 3 blocks in the plus sign shape, plus the 21 sets of 2 blocks. And the reason you don't see all the 2 block sets is because I had to make some modifications on things as I went along. It ended up being a little bit of a spontaneous project to make everything work together. So the totals I'm giving you are all after the fact and are accurate for the completed project. To begin assembling, I start with 4 of my 3 block sets, and I'm attaching the 4 sets together on the narrow blocks end to end. So I end up with this kind of railroad track looking set made up of the 4 sets of 3 blocks. Then I repeat that with the other 4 sets of 3 blocks the exact same way. I also have these flexible chopping mats from Dollar Tree. I measured the width of one of my 2 block sets across the mat, and I cut 4 pieces of this mat the same width as the 2 block set across, and we'll be using those later. I take 4 of my 2 block sets and I am going to attach them to one of my railroad track sets so that the ends line up with each other, as you can see right here. The railroad track set is attached to the ends of the 2 block sets. I take that second railroad track set and I attach it on the other side of the 4 2 block sets, and you can see here I ended up gluing it on top of those 2 block sets, but later on I had to remove that and reattach it to the ends of the 2 block sets like the other side. Again, this was a little bit of a flying by the seat of my pants kind of project. I spontaneously decided to add a single block to the 2 ends of my railroad track pieces to make them longer, using some loose blocks on the bottom to support the single blocks until they dried. And those 2 single blocks are included in our total of 72 blocks used. And here you can see me showing you that I moved the second railroad track piece so it was attached to the ends of the 2 block sets instead of on top of them. I take another 2 block set and glue it in between the 2 single blocks that we used to extend the length of both of those railroad track pieces, fitting it right in between them and then allowing that to dry. I mixed equal parts hot water and instant coffee to create a coffee stain, and I stained all the leftover 2 block sets I hadn't used yet, as well as a bunch of single blocks that I wanted to have on hand in case I needed to use them later. I like using the coffee stain because it creates a nice warm tone while still showing all of the wood grain on the blocks, and it also dries pretty quickly, and it smells really good if you like the smell of coffee. I use a dry paper towel to soak up any excess liquid on the blocks. Then I move on to staining the combo of the railroad tracks and the 4 sets of 2 blocks, which at this point looks much more like a rib cage. So I will be referring to it as such from now on. I coffee stain that rib cage piece on all sides, inside and outside, as all of the ends and the edges. So it's going to be totally covered with the coffee stain. Next, I take those 4 pieces of flexible chopping mat that we cut earlier. I want to glue one of my 2-block sets to the very bottom of each of the 4 pieces of mat. I decided that the best way to make that glue as invisible as possible was to use some of this Elmer's clear glue, which I'll link for you below. I apply the glue all over one side of the 2-block set and place it down on the mat at the very bottom edge, lining it up on the edge as straight as possible. And I do this with all 4 pieces of the mat and 4 of the 2-block sets. And I'm going to set them all aside to dry. I used a scissors to trim the sides of the mat that overlapped the 2-block sets, and I did that on all 4 of the mat pieces. I attach one of the mats to another by gluing the bottom block underneath the other bottom block, as you can see me doing right here. And I repeat that with a 3rd mat and block combo on the opposite side, and I'm going to prop them up so that they dry properly. I had inserted the 3 attached pieces of mat inside my rib cage piece and lined it up with the bottom blocks against the bottom of the rib cage. I used some clips to hold the mats up against the blocks to try and keep them straight while I was working. And in an attempt to keep the corners of the mats together, I thought maybe a little bit of Starbond super glue gel and the Starbond accelerator might do the trick, but ultimately, off camera, I used some small pieces of clear packing tape inside the 4 corners to hold all of those cutting mats to each other. I placed my 4th cutting mat piece inside the block rib cage, and then I attached the 4 2-block sets between those 2 sides of the rib cage, the open sides, to close everything up. And then I just waited for it to dry. I stood the piece up and I glued that loose inside mat with the 2 blocks on the bottom to the 2 inside bottom blocks on the other 2 sides, and I held it in place for the glue to set up. And even though I used the clear glue, I still didn't like the way the bottom of the piece looked on any of the sides. So I decided to cover them up with a set of 4 blocks, 2 rows of 2, glued right in the middle. And I did that on all 4 sides of the square piece. And because there was room left over on all the corners, I placed a single block standing up into each of those 4 corners for a more finished look. And as I said earlier, off camera, I had used some small pieces of clear packing tape on the inside corners of the cutting mat pieces to hold the 4 pieces of cutting mat together into a square shape inside of the wood block tower. And this is my tumbling tower block and chopping mat table lamp, and I can't tell you how long I have wanted to make those chopping mats into some kind of lampshade. And this week, I got my chance. I love the square chopping mat shade look with the illuminated light inside, and all I have in there for a light source is one single battery-operated push light from Dollar Tree. I love this DIY, and I sincerely hope you do too. For this DIY, we are using the brown tumbling tower blocks. You knew that we would. We're using a total of 29 of them, and I am using this miter shears I got on Amazon, I'll link it below, to cut the blocks into several different sizes. I wrote the list on the video over there, but I'll also caption the video with the different cuts to make. We're using 3 whole blocks and then 6 whole blocks plus 6 half-inch pieces of block, 8 1 1/4 inch cut blocks, and 6 small cut pieces of block that are somewhere between a 1/2 inch and 3/4 inch on the ruler. I mark the blocks with a pen and I cut them, and at the end, they look like this. To begin with, I take my 6 whole blocks and my 6 1/2 inch block pieces, and using this sanding block, I'm going to sand the crap out of them, basically. I'm wearing gloves because sanding off all that brown is really messy. Then I take my 6 blocks and my 6 1/2 inch pieces and I glue one piece to each of the blocks, as you see right here. And then I give them some time so that they will dry. While those are drying, it's back to sanding the rest of the cut block pieces, including those 3 hole blocks as well, until everything is sanded and distressed looking just the way we want it. I had printed out this image of a wood infinity, or maybe it's called an endless knot from Google, and I placed it under a piece of parchment paper so that I could still see it. And from the middle of the design, I begin building the design using the cut-sized block pieces. I begin gluing the cut pieces together, and again, I'm starting from the middle of the design and I'm slowly making my way outward using the design as a template and kind of like tracing it with the blocks, gluing each block and block piece one by one, matching it to the correctly sized space. And although I did lose the footage, I did use 4 small wood cubes from Dollar Tree that I stained brown, and I used them as little feet underneath to attach under my knot design to give it just a tiny bit of height. And this is my lovely endless knot wood trivet, or mini raised tray, or even a large coaster. You can decide for yourself. Yet another sanded brown tumbling tower block decor design, giving us lemonade out of lemons. Easy, fast, and uses up those brown blocks. You know I love it. For this DIY, we'll be using a grand total of 24 of the natural color tumbling tower blocks from Dollar Tree, as well as this super glue wood glue and 1 small wood cube, also from Dollar Tree. And to begin with, I place the wood cube flat in the middle, and I'm going to attach 4 blocks, 1 on each side of that wood cube, as you see me doing right here. Next, I'm gluing another 4 wood blocks. Each of them is placed on top of the end of the 4 bottom blocks that are attached to the wood cube. And then I'm going to place that whole piece aside for it to fully dry. Next, I take 16 more blocks, and I'm going to be creating 4 rows that each have 4 blocks in each row, with the 4 blocks attached to each other end to end. And then I'm going to place those 4 rows of 4 blocks aside for them to dry. I picked up one of these tall cylinder vases from Dollar Tree. I also have some of this rattan that's actually made out of plastic, which is not ideal, but we'll make it work. I will link a better one for you in the description box below, and I cut a piece of the rattan that was large enough to fit around the vase. I trimmed the top of the rattan off so it was the same height as the vase, give or take. And I placed it standing up on the vase, and I'm using some plain clear packing tape just so that I can hold the rattan in that same cylinder shape as the vase, and that's just temporarily while we are working with it. With that packing tape holding the rattan, I used some hot glue along the seam of the rattan to hold it in place permanently. And I'm going to remove that tape as I am going along and gluing until the tape is gone and the cylinder-shaped rattan stays perfectly in place. And remember, I told you about that rattan being plastic and not a natural fiber, so because of that, the color is not going to age and that bright yellow plastic color will remain. So I decide to paint the rattan with some Folk Art antique wax, which I'll link for you below, and I just use my brush to really push out and blend in the wax, just giving the rattan more of a natural toasted brown look and feel. I have a roll of paper raffia that I got on Amazon, and I'll link it for you below, but you can use the loose raffia that they sell at Dollar Tree to do this as well. I also have this beading needle that has an open middle, which is perfect if you are looking to sew something that's not thread, like paper raffia. I will try and find a needle to link for you to use for this, but if not, you can also do this with no needle. What I am going to do is to sew a cross stitch that goes up the seam of the rattan, which is going to be decorative, but it'll also help secure the seam together. It's dual purpose. And the cross stitch is literally just a crisscross going across the seam. I am careful as I go to make sure that the raffia remains flat as I'm sewing on the inside of the rattan and on the outside, like it's placed down flat. And when I'm done, I do slide the rattan back over that vase because I want to make sure that it will still fit and it didn't get too bulky inside from the raffia, which, you know, that's why we're making sure it's flat, because if it's flat on the inside, it won't take up too much room, it won't get too bulky, and it will still fit over the vase without a problem. So that is my main objective with keeping it flat as I go. I use that same raffia to stitch around the bottom of the rattan also, but that's more of a whip stitch just to first keep that rattan from unraveling at the bottom, but also decoratively to coordinate with the raffia sewn seam that we just did. It's not the neatest looking stitch, admittedly, because that bottom is a little more challenging to sew, but that's okay because the imperfectness of it kind of goes along with the organic look that we are going for. Once my wood block sets are dry, I mixed equal parts instant coffee and hot water to create a coffee stain, and I am staining all my block sets, all 24 blocks, plus 4 extra blocks, just in case I needed them for any reason, because you never know. I stained all sides of all the blocks and the block sets with the coffee, giving them all this very nice warm wood tone, but they still had all of that wood grain visible. At first, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with the top edge of the rattan cylinder, but ultimately I used that same raffia and I stitched it around the entire top of the rattan, just like I had did on the bottom of it. I wasn't really happy with the lack of color contrast there was between the rattan and the raffia, so I decided to use a small brush and some antique wax, and I actually painted all of that stitched raffia. That includes the seam and the top and the bottom of the cylinder. And ultimately, I was much happier with how it looked when it was a darker color. It almost made it slightly leather or suede-like looking, in my opinion. And also it was a little time consuming to paint all of it, but actually I find painting small, items like that with a tiny brush, I find it very relaxing. So it was fine. I turned that set of 8 blocks and the wood cube in the middle over so that the flat side of the wood cube was facing upwards. And this is going to be a base or a stand for the cylinder and the 4 sets of 4 blocks. Those 4 sets of 4 blocks are going to be placed on each of the 4 legs of the base. But I needed to make sure that my vase and the rattan cylinder would fit within those sets of 4 blocks that are standing up as the sides. So I placed the vase there on the base while I was gluing the 4 block set sides on top of that base. Hopefully that makes sense to you. I just wanted to make sure it would still fit. And I used some tall items after I glued the 4 sides up just to hold them in place while the rest of that glue totally dried. And this is my gorgeous rattan lamp. I used a Dollar Tree battery operated push light that I just dropped into the bottom of the glass vase. And in my opinion, this lamp has such a high-end and upscale look. I'm loving using rattan in my projects lately. If you may have noticed, I don't know, because honestly, rattan feels very summer decor to me. Maybe that's just me. It just does. You'll have to let me know if you agree. For this DIY, I have this empty cardboard gift box I had in my recycling bin, and to begin with, we are using the box bottom. I grabbed 6 of these brown tumbling tower blocks, but we are not using any of the brown ones in this project. I'm just stacking them in 3 groups of 2 blocks to raise up the bottom of my box. We'll be using a total of 56 of the natural color tumbling tower blocks from Dollar Tree, as well as the super glue wood glue, also from Dollar Tree. And all I'm doing right now is placing all the blocks I need into position around the box bottom, because I want to make sure they are properly placed to fit before I even attempt to start gluing them. And I did have to move some blocks around to make sure all 4 sides of the blocks around the box would fit evenly and they would all fit together, if that makes sense. I hope that it does. The blocks are placed flat against the side of the box. And the pattern is this. The pattern is alternating with one block going lower to the table and its edge lines up with the edge of the top of the box. And then next to that, I place 2 brown blocks that are underneath, and they're just spacers, to raise up the next block so that the bottom of the block lines up with the bottom of the box. It is just a zigzag pattern up and down. And I think the more that you see me place these blocks where they need to be, the more this will make sense to you, hopefully. To repeat, we are using a total of 56 tumbling tower blocks for the whole project. And on this box bottom, I am placing 9 blocks across those 2 long sides of the box and 5 blocks across the 2 short sides for a total of 28 on the box bottom. We'll use the other 28 on the box top, and that equals 56. Once the blocks are all placed and all my sides fit together, I begin gluing them in place just as they are. So I'm going to speed this process up for you, and to reiterate, it's a zigzag pattern. The lower blocks line up with the top edge of the box, and the higher blocks next to them line up with the bottom edge of the box, which we have raised up on some brown blocks that are underneath that box. We are placing 9 blocks on each of the long sides of the box and 5 blocks on each of the short sides of the box, for a total of 56 tumbling tower blocks used. To cover the very top of the box, I'm using one of the wood rectangles from the wood rectangle pack that's from Dollar Tree, and I also used a box cutter to trim the rectangle to the same length as the top of the box. I use wood glue to attach it. Since it is a little hard to see in the video, I've placed blocks on top of the lower blocks on the bottom box. They are not glued yet, but I also placed the top of the box down on top of the box bottom, and these blocks I just placed will be glued to the box top using the same pattern we used on the bottom of the box, but it's reversed. So ultimately, our box top and box bottom are both zigzag, and they fit together just like a zipper. I really hope that makes sense. Once I've finished gluing all those lower blocks into place, I begin placing and gluing the higher blocks that fit on top of the higher blocks on that box bottom. And these blocks will end up placed above the wood rectangle top of my box top. It's kind of like a mirrored version of the pattern on the box bottom. And I keep the top and bottom of the box together like this until both sides are completely dry. When both sides are dry, I separate the 2 sides of the box, and I am staining the bottom of the box using equal parts hot water and instant coffee. And I coffee stain all the visible wood of the wood blocks on that box bottom. Meanwhile, on my box top, there is a visible gap on both of the long sides of the top of the box between the wood rectangle and the blocks. So I used 2 pieces of bamboo skewer, and I literally just stuffed them into the gap on both of those sides. That solved my problem. I coffee stained the top side of the box just like I did the bottom side of the box. I needed a handle for the top of the box, so I made one by cutting a wood ring in half, and I grabbed these 2 wood coins and then coffee stained all 3 pieces to match the box. To create the handle, I used some Gorilla Glue super glue gel, which I will link for you below, to attach each end of the wood half ring to the middle of each of those wood coins, and then I set it aside to fully dry. Lastly, I used the Gorilla Glue to attach my wood handle to the middle of the box top. And this is my tumbling tower block trinket box. It does open and close, and that handle is pretty strong. I just think it's a really unique looking tumbling tower block DIY. When it's closed, it does kind of look like a castle or something, but it is functional and it is made out of wood and a recycled gift box, perfect as a Dollar Tree DIY. For this DIY, we'll be using a grand total of 20 of the natural color tumbling tower blocks from Dollar Tree, as well as the super glue wood glue, which is also from Dollar Tree. And to start with, I'm going to be making 4 sets of 3 blocks, and they are all going to be attached end to end. So that's 4 sets of 3 attached end to end. Next, I'm going to take 4 more blocks, and I make 2 sets of 2 blocks that are also going to be attached end to end, which is going to leave me with 4 more single blocks that we are also going to use, but we're going to use them later. I take one of my 3 block sets and one of my 2 block sets, and I'm going to attach them on their sides, as you see me doing here, into an L shape. I take another 2 block set and I'm going to attach it to the other side of the L shape to create a U shape. Then I take another 3 block set and I attach it to the top, closing in that U shape, and I am making an O or a rectangle, I guess you could call it. I use the metal L ruler from Dollar Tree to try and keep my edges and my corners straight. I stand the rectangle up and I am using 2 of the remaining 4 single blocks and attaching them right in the middle of the bottom of the rectangle, as you can see me doing right here. I take another 3 block set and I attach that on top of one of those single blocks at the end. I take that last 3 block set and attach it on top of the other single block. I take the last 2 single blocks and I attach them to the last 2 3-block sets on the top and going across to the middle of the top 2-block set. Hopefully that all makes sense to you. And with that, we have used all 20 of our tumbling tower blocks for this project. Meanwhile, I've got this large wood square from the crafters section of Dollar Tree, and I want to give it a white base coat. So I am using this Folk Art white chalk paint, which I will link for you below. I give the wood square a generous base coat on all sides and edges. For our set of 20 tumbling tower blocks, I'm using a mixture of water and Folk Art antique wax, which I will link for you below. I paint the whole piece, all sides, all edges, and I'm going to set it aside to dry. Once the base coat of white paint is dry on my wood square, I mixed the white paint with a couple of drops of Apple Barrel Country Gray color just to make it less white. And I mixed in a whole bunch of plain baking soda to give it a bunch of texture, kind of like plaster or concrete. I painted the whole top and the sides of the square, and then I set it aside until it was fully dry, which did take several hours. Once the baking soda and paint were dry, I took the square outside and used this Montana Granite texture spray, which I will link for you below. Lastly, I take the now dry granite textured square and using some wood glue, I attach it to the top of my 20 block set, which will be the base. And this is my faux granite and wood pedestal or riser. I feel like I call everything a riser, but whatever. You can call it whatever you want. I do like the look of a darker wood and any kind of texture like this faux granite or a faux concrete. I just really love deep wood tones and lots of texture. That's my jam. Hopefully you like it too. For this DIY, I've got these 2 wood squares that are about 4 inches, and you can find some wood squares at Dollar Tree, but I'll link the ones I'm using here for you below. I'm also using 2 pieces of scrap corrugated cardboard from my recycling bin, and we love a good upcycle. And they are the same size, which is 4 inches wide like the wood squares and just about 8 or 9 inches long. I'm using hot glue to attach them together so I can make one piece that's just a little bit stronger. I'm going to fold my cardboard into a kind of squared arch shape, like a bridge or something like that. I folded about 2 inches on both sides inward, with about 4 to 5 inches of slightly curved area in the middle. Then I use masking tape, plain masking tape, over all the edges of the 2 pieces of cardboard to really seal everything in. And I also use some tape along the 2 folds on the sides just to reinforce them a little bit. I'm using my favorite thick jute twine, which I will link for you below, but you can also use the regular weight jute from Dollar Tree to do this. It might just be a little less thick looking. I'm using some hot glue to secure the jute, and I am wrapping the jute around that middle flatter area of the cardboard from one end where it's folded to the other end where it's folded until that 4 to 5 inch space in the middle is covered with jute. Once the whole middle was wrapped with the jute, off camera, I wrapped one of the sides with the jute up to where the cardboard bended. Then I start wrapping the other side with the jute, and I kind of start in the middle of that side and wrapped toward the bottom first, then coming back up to the bend at that side, because at the bend, you may need to wrap using single pieces of jute instead of one long continuous piece, just to prevent the inside of that bend from getting too thick and not bending the same way. Hopefully that makes sense to you. We want to keep all our wrapped jute in a single row of jute, not doubling up on itself. So you may need to kind of finagle that bended area somewhat just to make everything fit. I want to attach the first wood square to one side of my arch, so I'm using Starbond Super Glue Gel, which I will link for you below, to glue it to the edge of the cardboard arch, and I hold it for a few minutes for that glue to set. Once the glue has set, I take my jute and, starting from where the wood and cardboard connect, I continue wrapping the jute around that wood square. I go about a third of the way down the wood square before ending right there. And off camera, I attached the other wood square and wrapped it with jute on the other side as well, so that the 2 sides matched. With the 2 wood squares attached, I decided to paint all the exposed wood using some Faux antique wax on all the exposed wood areas, as well as I also painted 8 tumbling tower blocks as a last-minute executive decision. My finished piece was pretty wobbly, so I made 4 sets of 2 of the painted tumbling tower blocks and used some wood glue to attach a 2-block set on the bottom of each side of the wood squares, just to help stabilize them a little bit. I was attaching them standing up on their sides, the tall, thin way, just to sort of keep them in place. It helped a little bit. It wasn't the answer, but it helped. I was looking to add a little bit of a pattern on the kind of boring jute. I had this black poly rope from Dollar Tree, as well as some white nautical rope, also from Dollar Tree. Starting with the nautical rope, I wrapped one piece on each side of my arch, right about where the wood square met the cardboard, lining it up in the same place on both sides in an effort to help camouflage the little unevenness between that cardboard and the wood square. Then I took 3 pieces of the black poly rope and added 1 piece above the nautical rope, 1 piece below the nautical rope, and 1 piece at the bottom where the jute met the wood square. And off camera, I repeated that the exact same way on the other side as well. And honestly, because I was still so wobbly, I made 2 sets of 3 more blocks and painted them with the antique wax and placed them one in the front and one in the back, sandwiched between the wood blocks that were lining the inside of both wood squares. And I apologize for the camera angle making it really hard for you to see how I did this, but you'll just have to take my word for it. And here you can see those wood blocks in place, and you can also see the ropey gluey mess going on underneath. So in order to hide all that mess, I grabbed this piece of brown felt I had in my stash. I cut it to size so that it would fit the underneath of my project, and used some hot glue to glue all the edges of the felt down onto the rope bottom of the project, as you see me doing right here, just in an attempt to clean it up a little bit. And this is my, oh my goodness, I don't even know what to call this. It's got wood, it's got rope, it's an interesting arched shape to it, and it does look good holding a plant. Let's just call it a decorative item, and I will leave the rest up to you guys to interpret what you think its purpose is. You can let me know in the comments any thoughts you might have. Thanks for watching almost 3 hours of 2025 Jenga block hacks. I know I haven't posted in a while and I've missed you all so much, but I am looking forward to coming back in the new year with some brand new Dollar Tree DIYs to share with all of you. Until next time, remember that together we're making the world a more beautiful place, one DIY at a time.